Chapter 57. The sky was dark, and it was drizzling. The walls were white, and the roof tiles were gray. Moss crawled up the walls, and the Boston creeper crawled out of the courtyard to look at the new world outside. The wooden door was old and peeling, but the copper lock had been polished to a shiny shine due to the passage of time. In this remote and narrow alley, there were usually very few people passing by here. Only a few old residents walked in and out. Occasionally, a photographer with a unique eye would bring a girl in a white dress over to take artistic photos, and then take her to a room to have sex. However, today, there was a large crowd gathered in this alley. 40 students in raincoats stood in this alley, chatting and laughing in groups of 2 or 3. The line stretched infinitely, and it looked quite lively and spectacular. 2:30 p.m. It was the time for classes at Rosefinch Secondary. A student looked at his watch and said, "Huang Haoran, why isn't Mr. Fong here yet? It's almost time for class." "That's right. He asked you to bring us here, so why isn't he here yet?" "Don't worry, everyone. Mr. Fong must have gone to borrow a boat. Didn't he borrow a boat at Sparrow River last time?" "Li Hao, are you crazy? This isn't Sparrow River. Where did Mr. Fong go to borrow a boat? Where did he come from if he borrowed a boat?" "I'm just joking. You really don't have a sense of humor." Huang Haoran frowned slightly, hesitating if he should give Mr. Fong another call to urge him. Zheng Guodong, Li Yang, and Chen Tao had also come to class today, because they really couldn't take any more days off. Moreover, if they kept taking days off, even if Fong Yan couldn't control them, they would have already lost the war. However, they had learned their lesson and didn't rashly say anything to start a war. Chen Tao took out a cigarette and smoked it, then took the initiative to light it for Zheng Guodong. He said sarcastically, "I wonder what this idiot is up to this time. Maybe it's a surprise?" Zheng Guodong laughed coldly. "In any case, we'll just follow the plan we discussed. We won't take the initiative to provoke him in order to avoid giving him something to use against us." This time, even Zhang Xiaofeng, that old fellow, stood up to protect him. "Even my father is not very easy to talk to. However, if you don't court death, you won't die. With this guy's personality, sooner or later, he'll help us catch him. At that time, we'll kill him in one strike and chase him away." "Zheng is right." Li Yang agreed. "Let's just watch from the sidelines and wait for him to make a mistake." "Didn't I already make a mistake?" Chen Tao chuckled. "It's class time, but the teacher is nowhere to be seen. Do you think we should report this to the school? As the class monitor of Class 9, I should make a phone call to the Academic Affairs Office." Zheng Guodong said proudly as he took out his phone from his pocket and prepared to dial. "Mr. Fong is here," someone in front exclaimed. Then, a group of people rushed in the direction where Fong Yan came from. Just now, Zheng Guodong and the other two were still standing in the middle of the crowd. In the blink of an eye, half of the alley was only left with the 3 of them standing there alone. The 3 of them felt a little sad in their hearts. It seemed that they had been separated from the majority of the people. "Zheng." Li Yang looked at Zheng Guodong with an embarrassed expression. Now, they were faced with a dilemma. If they joined in, they would feel very embarrassed. If they insisted, not only them, but probably all the students would feel embarrassed. "I'm the class monitor. I still have to maintain discipline," Zheng Guodong said. Yes. That's it," Li Yang said with a smile. Fong Yan looked at the smiles on the students' faces and knew that they were happy and looking forward to the 2 classes today. This was the effect he wanted. If the students wanted to learn and were willing to learn, there was no need to worry about their grades. "Huang Haoran, is everyone here?" Fong Yan asked. "There are 41 people in the class." "Qi Tian isn't here yet," Huang Haoran said. "He didn't ask for leave either." "Yes." Fong Yan nodded. "Qi Tian will be here in a while." Since Qi Tian had already asked for leave from Fong Yan, Huang Haoran had nothing else to say. Fang Yen looked at everyone with a smile and asked, "Now, you should know which text we're going to learn today, right?" "Alley in the Rain," all the students shouted in unison. They were learning Farewell to Cambridge again, on the Sparrow River. It was raining today, and they were brought to this old alley by the language class representative. How could they not know which text they were going to learn today? That's right. Today, we're going to learn Alley in the Rain, Fang Yen said with a smile. We've learned Farewell to Cambridge again earlier, so everyone should have a basic understanding of modern poetry. I've also let everyone try to compose a poem, and quite a few of you wrote quite well. Today, let's strike while the iron is hot and continue to deepen everyone's impression and feeling of poetry. "Teacher, are you going to read us a poem?" a student asked. "Yes, reading in this alley in the rain, it feels so good, Mr. Fang, you're so cool. You surprise us every time." Fang Yen waved his hand and said, "Shoo, everyone, keep quiet." All the students held their breath, knowing that teacher Fang Yen was about to start the class. Fang Yen combed his hair, making it look even messier. Then, he borrowed a pair of black-rimmed glasses from a male student and put them on the bridge of his nose, making him look more artistic. Bang! He opened the oil paper umbrella in his hand and raised it to cover his head. Fang Yen held the umbrella and walked to the middle of the alley. He looked into the distance and softly recited, holding the oil paper umbrella, "Alone. Wandering for a long, long time. And a lonely alley in the rain. I hope to meet a girl like a lilac, a girl with a grudge, clack. Clack. Clack." A girl wearing a white cheapao with floral patterns slowly walked over. Her long hair was coiled up on top of her head, and the red high heels on her feet tapped on the stone path, producing a clear and melodious sound. Heavens, there's really a lilac girl, that's Chinitian, it's Chinitian, oh my god, Chinitian is so beautiful. She's so beautiful. My goddess, even Zheng Guodong, Li Yang, and Chen Tao were excited. Zheng Guodong grinned and said, "Fortunately, we're here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to see Chinitian." Xu Huanghaoren was the class representative of the Chinese department. He had the responsibility to maintain class discipline. Now that the students were disturbing teacher Fang Yan's class, he could only stand up and remind everyone to keep quiet. Seeing Huanghaoren's action, the students immediately fell silent. Zheng Guodong opened his mouth, but he finally swallowed the words he wanted to say. He was afraid of causing public anger, and even more afraid of incurring the wrath of the goddess. He was also a pursuer and admirer of Chinitian. Fang Yen was more and more satisfied with Huanghaoren. He thought to himself, "I'll hold an election in a few days to promote Huanghaoren as the class representative of the Chinese department. It would be great if I could remove Zheng Guodong as the class monitor." As the class monitor, he didn't fulfill his responsibilities as a class monitor. Instead, he brought about an extremely negative impact on the class. Unfortunately, Fang Yen isn't the class monitor, so he can't decide the appointment of the class monitor. "I'm the descendant of Fang's Tai Chi, but I can't decide the appointment of the class monitor," a small student official. "There doesn't seem to be any connection between the two, right?" The alley quieted down again. Only the sound of wind and rain, as well as the tapping of high heels on the ground, could be heard. Chinitian, who was holding an oil paper umbrella, got closer and closer. Her simple, elegant, and beautiful face became more and more refreshing. In the past, Chinitian always wore a school uniform and casual clothes. She was straightforward and simple. Other than the occasional baseball cap on her head, she had almost no ornaments on her body. But even so, she was still beautiful, elegant, and one of a kind. Chinitian. No matter where she stood alone, she was a queen. She stood with a group of people, but she was still a queen. It was the first time they saw Chinitian wearing a cheongsam. It was the first time they saw her coiled her long hair on top of her head, revealing her slender, swan-like neck. It was the first time they saw her showing off her tall and curvy figure. It was also the first time they saw her wearing red high heels that seemed to be able to step into the depths of one's soul. When Fang Yan saw Qinitian wearing a cheongsam for the first time, he felt his heart skip a beat. These boys had even worse self-control. Their eyes were fixed on her, and some students didn't even realize that they were drooling. Isn't she too beautiful? They thought in their hearts. Fang Yan's voice pulled them back to reality in time. He recited with anticipation and affection, she has the color of lilacs, so all the students looked at Qinitian's color. In the hazy smoke, she walked over gracefully, like a goddess. No, she was a goddess. The fragrance of lilacs, although they didn't smell it, no one would deny that Qinitian had the fragrance of lilacs. Oh, it was even more fragrant than lilacs. The sadness of lilacs, Qinitian's face was expressionless as she walked with her umbrella in hand. However, at this time and place, in this situation, they all felt that Qinitian was indeed sad and lonely. She was so excellent and had no friends. How could she not be lonely? Sorrowful in the rain, sorrowful and hesitant, Qinitian walked towards Fang Yan, and the two walked forward face to face. The girl floated past me, she silently went far, far away, to the decadent fence, walked through this rainy alley. Qinitian and Fang Yan brushed past each other. The two didn't speak, didn't nod to greet each other, and didn't make eye contact. The two strangers in the vast sea of people met by fate, but they didn't know each other. As the high heels walked further and further away, Fang Yan couldn't help but turn around and look. Her expression was confused, and her eyes were sad. It's like a sad love story, a girl said in a low voice, her eyes red. Chapter 58. Poetry emphasized artistic conception. In a classroom filled with white walls, blackboard tables, and chairs, and the stench of sweat and feet permeated the air, shaking one's head and reciting, was there any artistic conception? Definitely not. This was perfunctory. The teacher perfunctory the students, and the students perfunctory the teacher. They might write down who the author of the poem was, what era it was written in, and the specific historical environment. They also knew that the lilac-like girl symbolized the girl and the yearning for a better life. However, the artistic beauty of the poem itself was ignored. Now, Fang Yan did the opposite. I won't introduce the author to you, and I won't ask you to write down the year he was born and died. He won't even mention a word about what the poem symbolizes or what the author's feelings are. I'm just reading the poem to you so that you know what kind of poem it is. We put aside all the complicated things and just enjoy the poem. Obviously, the effect of this was very significant. All the students were deeply moved by this scene. They remembered this rainy alley that they didn't even know the name of. They remembered Fang Yan and Qinitian walking face to face and brushing shoulders. They remembered the sadness in Fang Yan's eyes when he looked back. The saddest love in the world was when you fell in love with her at first sight, and then she turned around and disappeared. On the bus, in the airport, in the bookstore, in the tourist area, in a strange city or on a street. Have you ever met such a person? Have you ever felt this kind of regret? You practiced Taoism for 500 years, only to exchange for a passing love. Isn't this kind of thing too cruel? Many female students cried. They were completely immersed in the sadness of never seeing each other again in the poem. They were young and lively, but also emotionally fragile. They longed for perfection and firmly believed that lovers would get married. Someone shouted, "Mr. Fang, hurry up and catch up with her. Ask for her name, ask for her phone number." The boys were also very depressed. They wanted to express something, but they couldn't say anything. Such a simple story, and it wasn't a life and death parting. How could it make people feel so sad? Fang Yan stood where he was and did not say anything. He only waited quietly. The students needed time to memorize and digest. He knew that 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, more than 10 years, perhaps when their hair had turned white and they could only eat soup, this scene would still appear in their minds. Life is short. How many times can we go out, how many people can we love, and how many beautiful sceneries can we experience? What reason do they have not to remember it? Cluck. Dong. Dong. The sound of high heels tapping on the stone floor rang again. Chinitian had returned with the oil paper umbrella. A girl cried out in surprise, "Miss Lilac is back." He was too deeply poisoned because he was too obsessed. Because of Fang Yan's unique teaching method, they all fell in love with the story Rainy Alley. Just like how you would want to know a celebrity's height, 3 measurements, what kind of food she eats, and what color underwear she wears, even without Fang Yan's reminder, they would also search for information about the author and the poem. Only in this way could they understand the essence of the article more clearly and deeply. This was the difference between active learning and passive learning. This was also the difference between an ordinary teacher and an ultimate teacher. A great person would definitely wear special shoes and not walk the common path. Chinitian walked in front of Fang Yan, stared at him with bright eyes, and said, "You owe me another favor. We're all classmates, there's no need to say that I owe you." Fang Yan chuckled and waved his hand. "You're treating me like an outsider. I want to be the female lead, not the same as this cheapao." Chinitian laughed. "It's just a prop." In broad daylight, he actually dared to openly confess to a good teacher. This was simply too much. Fang Yan was so angry that he laughed at Chinitian. "How is this a prop?" Fang Yan explained. "This is a performance. I'm the poet, you're Miss Lilac. If you're a prop, then wouldn't I be a prop too? I'm Chinitian." "I know. You're just temporarily Miss Lilac. The character you're playing is Miss Lilac. Just like when you rehearsed the play Romeo and Juliet before you played Juliet. We did this because of love and interest, right?" "No," Chinitian said. Fang Yan felt that this girl was really difficult to communicate with. It seemed that he had to make a suggestion to the school to teach interpersonal skills from middle school. "I rehearsed the play Romeo and Juliet because I like this story," Chinitian said with a serious face. "I wore the cheapao as Miss Lilac because I like you." "I don't believe it." "How do you prove it?" "You play Miss Lilac 40 times and pass by every student in class 9. Fang Yan shamelessly made a shameless request. After saying that, he was so ashamed that he couldn't lower his head. Because when he looked down, he could see Chinitian was staring at him with wide eyes. "Okay." Chinitian actually nodded and agreed. "I promise you, not because I'm stupid. Just because I really like to do some things for you." "How about 20 times?" Fang Yan found his conscience and took the initiative to reduce the number. "No, 40 times." Chinitian insisted. "You want me to be a prop, and I want you to remember me." Holding an oil paper umbrella, alone wandering in a long, lonely alley, I hope to meet a girl like Lilac. A lilac girl. Cluck. 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 Chinitian, holding an oil paper umbrella, slowly walked over. The scene was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. The boy's pupils dilated, the muscles on his cheeks trembled, and his hands loosened and clenched. His mouth squirmed, but no sound came out. "Yi Xiang, hurry up and recite," someone urged. Yi Xiang's face turned red, and he said with a sad face, "Teacher, I forgot my lines." Fang Yan smiled, thinking that he also made a mistake. This Miss Lilac was too beautiful, and affected the student's performance. "I won't make such a mistake next time." "Next," Fang Yan said. Because time was limited, everyone only had one chance. He hoped that everyone could grasp it well, but if someone really couldn't grasp it well, Fang Yan didn't know what to say to them. Yi Xiang handed the oil paper umbrella in her hand to the next student, and Chinitian once again held an oil paper umbrella and walked out from another entrance of the alley. She approached silently. As she approached, her eyes cast a breathless gaze. Next, Fang Yan shouted. Number 1 began, number 40 ended. Chinitian was number 41 of class 9. Wearing high-heeled shoes and holding an oil paper umbrella, she walked from one end of the alley to the other, and from the other end to the other end, while the poet was reciting the poem. She was as fresh as a poem, and as beautiful as a painting. Every time someone recited a poem, she walked with the umbrella. No rest, no pause. It was as if she didn't know fatigue. Her expression was as calm as ever, her movements were as elegant as ever, and her long hair was neatly coiled on top of her head. It was still the same the first time she walked. The lilac girl in the poem had only brushed shoulders with the poet once, but Chinitian had walked 37 times. Fang Yen couldn't help but shout for Chinitian to stop a few times. But Chinitian refused. If they wanted all the students to have a chance to recite a poem during class time, they had to cherish every minute and second. Moreover, the students really hoped to have a chance to recite a poem. They were eager, just like rowing a boat in the Sparrow River, to recite a poem. This was the learning method they were looking forward to. In the decay of the rain dispelled her color, dispelled her fragrance. Next, Fang Yen shouted. Chinitian walked for the 38th time. The girl floated past me, she silently walked away, far away. Next, Fang Yen shouted. Chinitian walked for the 39th time. My hope floated past a girl like lilac, a girl with a heart full of sorrow. Number 40. This was the last student in the class. Except for Chinitian himself. Chinitian stopped and stood under the eaves with the umbrella in the rainy alley. She was slim and elegant, even more beautiful than the lilac girl in the poem. Fang Yen was moved by Chinitian. All the students were moved by Chinitian. 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 They shouted Chinitian's name loudly, their passionate voices breaking the silence of the rainy alley. The cold wind rustled, but everyone felt as though there was a fire in their hearts. Chinitian, thank you, a girl ran over and said. Thank you so much. Señoritian, you're amazing, goddess, you're our goddess. Fang Yen waved his hand and said, it's time for school to end. Let's go home. Roar, the playful students shouted and ran away. More students ran over to say goodbye to Fang Yen and Chinitian before leaving. The figures and voices faded away. Only Fang Yen and Chinitian were left in the alley. Have they all left? Chinitian asked. Yes, Fang Yen said. Chinitian's knees went soft and she was about to fall to the ground. She really couldn't take it anymore. Fang Yen was quick. He leaned forward and reached out with both hands to pick up Chinitian's body that was about to fall to the ground and held her in his arms. Warm and fragrant. Her breath smelled like orchids. Looking at Chinitian's face, Fang Yen felt that this was really a test for him. But she was his student. Fang Yen quickly looked away. Chinitian smiled and said, I said. I'm not a prop. I'm the female lead. Chapter 59. In the milk tea shop, Fang Yen took off the high heels on Chinitian's feet. The small feet, as white as snow and as tender as a new lotus root, appeared in front of him. If it were not for the red and swollen side of the little toe and the worn skin on the heel, there would be almost no flaws. Fang Yen said guiltily, does it hurt? Yes. Why didn't you say it earlier? I said it, Chinitian said. When did I say it? Fang Yen asked. He asked Chinitian to rest several times, but Chinitian still insisted on walking 40 times. I said I don't want to be a prop, I just want you to remember me. Chinitian pointed to his feet and said, did that give me extra points? No. Fang Yen pretended to be angry and said. Chinitian smiled and said, you still got extra points. Otherwise, you would have left long ago. Fang Yen put the high heels on the leg of the chair and said, I told you to wear stockings at the time, but you didn't listen. Otherwise, how could your feet be rubbed like this? Chinitian curled his lips and said, were the earthy yellow stockings you asked for, or the lilac girl in the poem? I also said you could wear black. Then you're still an auntie, Chinitian said. When I wear a cheongsam, I absolutely can't wear stockings. This is a woman's principle of dressing, and I can't violate it. Then you suffer, Fang Yan said. Sit down and wait for a while. I'll go buy you some medicine to rub on. Don't let the wound get inflamed. Qinitian smiled and said, go and come back quickly. You can't run away. Am I that kind of person? Fang Yan was angry. Fang Yan bought medicine and cotton cloth in the pharmacy. When he returned to the milk tea shop, he found that Qinitian was surrounded by a group of students in school uniforms. Senior Sister Etienne, is Rosefinch High School fun? I also want to take the Rosefinch exam in the future. Senior Sister Etienne, do you live here? Your house is here too. We are neighbors after all. Senior Sister Etienne, I'll treat you to some milk tea, Qinitian answered with a smile and quickly wrote something with his hands. When Fang Yan got closer, he realized that she was signing autographs for her fans. Wherever this girl went, she was the center of attention. She wasn't a star, but she could always enjoy the treatment of a big star. After Qinitian signed the last copy, he handed the pen and the autograph books to a young girl in front of him and said, okay, my friend is here. When the girls saw Fang Yan standing at the periphery, they immediately giggled and asked, Senior Sister Etienne, is he your boyfriend? I'm Qinitian's teacher. Fang Yan quickly explained. He didn't want these students to misunderstand. Wow. The girls were full of envy. Senior Sister Etienne has hooked up with the teacher. That's amazing, what the hell is going on? Fang Yan was quite speechless. Qinitian waved his hand and said, goodbye. Bye, Senior Etienne. The girls waved at Qinitian and left with their cups of milk tea in their hands. When they left, they would look at Fang Yan and Qinitian from time to time. Are they from number 1 middle school? Fang Yan asked. Number 7 middle school, Qinitian said. He's really famous, Fang Yan said. Huang Haoran previously said that Qinitian had been famous since junior high school and was the idol of countless people. Now, it seemed that it was true. Fang Yan opened the cap of the potion and squatted down to carefully apply the potion on Qinitian's red and swollen feet. Hiss. Qinitian shrunk her feet back. She had never been injured before. She was afraid of pain. Fang Yan looked up at Qinitian and said teasingly, Qinitian also has something that she's afraid of? Doesn't Fang Yan have it too? I do. What are you afraid of? Yi Ro. Qinitian's eyes narrowed slightly and said, it sounds like a girl's name. Fang Yan, do I need to treat her as my competitor? After sending off Qinitian, Fang Yan stood at the intersection, feeling lost. This was the intersection where Fang Yan had rented Sister Li's house. The familiar street, the familiar intersection, the familiar steamed bun shop and the black girl who was selling steamed buns. Fang Yan accidentally found the old alley when he was walking in this area. So when he saw from the weather forecast that it would rain today, he immediately told his students to bring raincoats to class. Qinitian wanted him to accompany him to go shopping, and he happened to remember that he needed a girl. So, the two hit it off. He accompanied Qinitian to go shopping, and Qinitian didn't raise any objection when she knew that he gave her the Cheongsam for another purpose. Fang Yan was not stupid, and Qinitian was even smarter. She not only promised to be Fang Yan's model, but she was also willing to be a model for all 40 students in the class. Since she wanted Fang Yan to owe her a favor, she would make this favor bigger. This girl. Fang Yan smiled bitterly. He thought that with his handsome and profound knowledge, he would definitely be liked and favored by girls. However, he had never thought of developing a relationship with his student. She is still a child. Fang Yan thought in his heart. Of course, a child with a mature mind. Fang Yan thought of another girl. He thought of the girl who cried and shouted that it was all his fault when he left with his bag. I hope everything is fine with her, Fang Yan thought in his heart. Teacher Fang Yan. A clear voice rang in his ear. Fang Yan turned around and saw Jiang Qin in his school uniform and carrying a bag at the bus stop not far away. He was looking at him with a surprised expression. Fang Yan smiled bitterly. He was thinking of Cao Cao, and here he was. Was Cao Cao doing track and field? He ran really fast. Jiang Qin quickly rushed toward Fang Yan, the bag on his shoulder swaying left and right, as if it would fall at any time. Mr. Fang, why are you here? Jiang Qin stood in front of Fang Yan. His eyes curved into a beautiful crescent, and his eyes were full of smiles. I brought my student here for class. Fang Yan said. Class? Jiang Qin looked confused. However, he quickly pushed this question aside and said, Then are you standing here waiting for me? Not really. Can you come to my house for dinner? I will ask my mother to cook something delicious for you. Jiang Qin said and reached out to pull Fang Yan's arm. Jiang Qin. Fang Yan stood still. No matter how hard Jiang Qin tried, he couldn't move. Fang Yan looked at the girl's blushing face with heartache and said softly, It's not convenient today. When is it convenient? Jiang Qin grabbed Fang Yan's arm and refused to let go. She looked up at Fang Yan. When do you say it is convenient? Jiang Qin. Fang Yan didn't know how to explain the current situation. Adults have adult considerations and scruples, but some words can't be said too clearly to the child. Jiang Qin's eyes were red. Her beautiful eyes stared at Fang Yan's face and said, My mother is worried that I will like you, right? Don't think so much. Fang Yan advised. You think too much. Jiang Qin shouted angrily. When did I say I want to like you? When did I say I want to fall in love with you? When did I? I just like to be with you. I just like to talk to you. I just like to listen to you tell me the story of the heart of the essay. I treat you as a teacher, as a friend. Why do you think so much? Why are your thoughts so complicated? Fang Yan was speechless. Yes. Although Jiang Qin was weird, she was a girl who knew how to be reserved. She was young and lively, beautiful and fashionable. However, she was also strict with herself. She was definitely not the kind of bad girl who ran to the society to fool around. In the process of contact between the two, although she spoke impolitely, she respected him in her heart. Fang Yan could feel it. The two were close and abided by the rules. It was just that he couldn't explain it to others. However, because of the dance incident, Jiang Qin's parents became suspicious. Fang Yan couldn't rent the Jiang family anymore. Children had children's thoughts, and adults had adult worries. Even if Fang Yan was a teacher, he couldn't solve the thorny problem that happened to him. Your mother did it for your own good. Fang Yan said softly. Yes. My mother did it for my own good. You did it for my own good. Jiang Qin's voice became louder. At this moment, the little girl's emotions completely exploded. But I'm not good at all. Seeing Fang Yan's helpless and bitter smile, Jiang Qin slowly calmed down. She released her little hand that grabbed Fang Yan's arm and looked at Fang Yan and asked, You won't go back anymore, will you? Yes. Fang Yan nodded. The school gave me a house, you won't go to my house for dinner anymore, will you? I don't think there's any chance. Then you won't answer my phone anymore? Won't contact me again? Jiang Qin. Fang Yan looked at Jiang Qin's tear-stained face and said, You're still a student. The most important thing for you now is to study hard. Don't think about other things. Okay? Jiang Qin knew that she was powerless to change anything. Just as Fang Yan said, she was still a student. She was still too young. She couldn't do anything. She wiped her tears and took off the bag from her shoulder. She opened the zipper and took out a gray box from inside. This is for you. Jiang Qin held the box and handed it over. What is it? Fang Yan asked. A white shirt. Jiang Qin said with red eyes. I like boys who wear white shirts. I like the way you look in white shirts. You must look better than anyone else in it. At that time, falling in love with someone was not because you had a car or a house, but because the sun was shining that afternoon and you wore a white shirt. Chapter 60. Under the warm light, the aroma of the steak filled the room. Garnished with 2 pieces of broccoli in a small fruit salad, it looked especially appetizing. The red wine in the glass was made by a count from the Stour region. Count red wine wasn't very famous in the outside world, and many people probably hadn't heard of it. Search engines couldn't find any information about it. That was because Count red wine wasn't sold to the public. After the Jiang family bought the winery, which was located in the best wine production area in France, they drank some of the wine and gave the rest to their friends and business partners. The wine and dishes were delicious, and people were whispering to each other. The atmosphere at dinner was quite harmonious. A noblewoman in a black dress cut the steak on the plate in front of her elegantly, but didn't put it in her mouth. She looked at Lu Chaoga and asked, "Chaoga, how are you doing at school?" "Very well." Lu Chaoga put down the fork in her hand and answered in a low voice. "I heard from Zhu Lu that some people were bullying you. Why are they so hateful? Should I ask Zhu Lu to talk to your school? Or should I ask your uncle Jiang to talk to the director of education?" The noblewoman seemed to care a lot about Lu Chaoga, as if she was going to take care of everything when it came to Lu Chaoga. "No need," said Lu Chaoga. She wiped the corner of her mouth with a white cloth and said frankly, "There were some small disputes, which are inevitable in any job. I can handle it." "That won't do. Our Chaoga is so outstanding. Why should they bully you?" said the noblewoman unhappily. "Mom." Jiang Zhulu put down the knife and said with a smile, "You said that Chaoga is so outstanding. Why are you still worried about her? Don't worry. No one can bully her. You're always on her side." The noblewoman glanced at Jiang Zhulu and said, "Luckily, Chaoga isn't your wife yet. If you get married, I won't have a say in this family." Lu Chaoga didn't say anything and lowered her head to cut the tomatoes on the plate. Seeing Lu Chaoga's reaction, Jiang Zhulu smiled gently and said, "Mom, don't you trust me and Chaoga? Are we the kind of people who don't know how to be filial to the elderly?" "No. Of course not." The lady's beautiful face darkened. She looked at her son and Lu Chaoga with a smile and said, "Chaoga, Zhulu, when are you two going to get married? He's not young anymore. He should be married, right? In the past, when you said that you wanted to be busy with your career, I agreed." Now, Zhu Lu's career was going well, and Chaoga had become the vice principal of the school. That was a success, wasn't it? What other excuses do you have? "I'm still waiting for my grandchildren." "Mom." Jiang Zhulu consoled, "We will consider all of these things." "What comprehensive consideration? By the time you've considered everything, I'm already on the verge of death. Why don't you just listen to me and get married on New Year's Day this year? We can find an auspicious day next year. I've already done some calculations. Zhu Lu's fate is ocean-bottom gold, and Zhaoga's is water. You two are perfect for each other. Zhaoga can also bring good luck to her husband." Lu Chaoga put down her knife and fork and said, "I'm full. Enjoy your meal." After that, she got up and left the dining room, heading upstairs. Jiang Zhulu put down his cutlery as well, his eyelids drooping slightly. Qiang Longtan stared at his wife sharply and said, "Don't you understand that you shouldn't talk when you're eating? Do you have to follow these stupid rules when you're eating? It'd be great if we could sit down together and chat happily. Let the kids decide for themselves." After saying that, Qiang Longtan also left the dining table. "Hey, old Jiang." The rich woman called out. Seeing that her husband was ignoring her, she said to her son angrily, "Look at your father. Are you his biological son or is Lu Chaoga his daughter? Why are both you and your father talking about outsiders? Are you going to let me stay in this house anymore?" "Mom, It's not like I don't know father's personality. Jiang Zhulu sat down next to his mother and held her hand. He always doted on Zhaoga more when we were little. I'm used to it. He's good to Zhaoga. Am I not doing the same for Zhaoga? It's because I'm too good to her that I want her to become our Jiang family's daughter-in-law. The rich woman grabbed Jiang Zhuliu's hand and said, My son is so outstanding. There are so many girls who want to marry into our family. Mom, how can you praise yourself like that? Jiang Zhulu laughed. I'm your son. Of course you think I'm good in every way. It's not just me who thinks you're good. The entire Jiang city thinks you're good. The rich woman said proudly, otherwise, why would the 4 talents of Huaqing only choose you, Mei Shua, Lan Shanggu, and Lu Shu? Which one of you isn't the most beautiful and talented in our Huaqing? Why didn't they put Li Baldi, Zhang Fatso, and Wang Ermatzi up? That's because some bored people put the 4 of us together to create some ranking. You don't know how many people we've offended and been ridiculed because of this ranking. Plus, what are the 4 talents of Huaqing? Aren't there still the 7 lunatics of Huaxia? Pfft, those people are all crazy. The 4 talents are enough. Why are you thinking so much? Son, when are you going to marry Lu Chaoga? Look at Lu Chaoga's big butt. She looks like she's going to give birth to a son. I have experience in this area. In the Jiang family's mansion, Lu Chaoga had a room of her own. Ever since her parents passed away, Lu Chaoga moved in. The Jiang family treated her well and treated her like their own daughter. Especially Qiang Longtan, who treated her even more attentively than his own son, Jiang Zhulu. Although Mother Jiang, Ren Jing, was a little naggy, she was also very tolerant and took care of her. Jiang Zhulu treated her well too. However, it was also because everyone treated her well that Lu Chaoga always felt like her whole body was covered by mucous membranes, making it hard for her to breathe. It was so heavy that it made her feel uncomfortable. She looked down at her chest. Other than her full breasts, there wasn't much clothing. Maybe it was because her breasts had grown a little. It was really annoying to have to take her wherever she went. She took out the jade guanine from her neck and gently held it in her palm. A trace of coolness passed through her, and her restless mood gradually calmed down. This was worn around her neck by her mother when she was very young, and it was her most precious ornament. Because of the long time, many details of her life had been forgotten. However, when she held this jade guanine, some fragments of her life with her parents would naturally flow into her mind. It was like a floodgate of memories. When it was opened, the tide of memories would surge out. When it was closed, the water would recede, and she couldn't remember anything. Knock, knock, there was a light knock on the door. Lu Chaoga walked over and opened the door. Qiang Longtan stood at the door with a loving face and said with a smile, You haven't eaten enough, have you? Do you want the kitchen to send you another bowl of soup? Uncle, no need. I'm full. Lu Chaoga refused. Come in and have a seat. Qiang Longtan walked into the room and sat down at a small table on the balcony. Chaoga, make me a cup of coffee. You make the best coffee in our family. Even your aunt and Zhulu can't compare to you. Lu Chaoga didn't secretly rejoice at the praise. She went to the cabinet and took out a cup of coffee, then carefully steeped it. It wasn't freshly ground coffee beans, but as long as it was carefully steeped, it would have a very extraordinary taste. Lu Chaoga put a cup of coffee in front of Qiang Longtan, then pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Qiang Longtan took a sip of the coffee, letting the bitter aroma reverberate in his mouth. Only then did he look at Lu Chaoga and say with a smile, It's been so many years, and you know what your aunt is like. She likes you, and that's why she's always trying to make our families closer. She doesn't mean any harm. I understand, said Lu Chaoga indifferently. Of course, it's really annoying to talk about this kind of thing too much. I'll have a good talk with her and ask her to stop pressuring you on this matter. Young people should solve their own problems. Why should old people like us get involved? Lu Chaoga was grateful in her heart, but her face was as calm as a mirror. Uncle, let's not talk about it. I don't want to put you in a difficult position. What's there to put me in a difficult position? Qiang Long Tan put down the cup of coffee and said seriously, I'm trying to reason with her. Does she want to quarrel with me? Besides, talking about this issue over and over again is like bullying others and trying to get back at her. Qiang Long Tan looked at Lu Chaoga with pity and said, You came to our Jiang family when you were 6, and I've always treated you as my own daughter. Whether you want to be Jiang Zhuliu's wife or not, you're a part of our Jiang family. No one will treat you as an outsider. Don't feel any pressure on this matter. If you like Jiang Zhuliu, then be with him. If you don't like him, then kick him aside. I trust in Chaoga's taste, and I believe that you'll be able to find the man you like. You're the one in charge here, and no one is allowed to interfere. Thank you. Lu Chaoga was finally touched and she thanked him again. There's nothing to thank me for. Qiang Long Tan waved his hand and said. There's no need for thanks between father and daughter. You're always treating yourself as an outsider. That's not good. Lu Chaoga smiled but didn't say anything. No matter how well the Jiang family treated her, she still felt a deep sense of loneliness. There was one kind of irreplaceable feeling that was more peaceful than love, more enduring than friendship, and more touching than family. People looked forward to it every day when they were away from home. People got tired of each other when they returned home. That kind of feeling was called father and mother. Chapter 61. Jiang Zhuliu went upstairs and saw that the door to Lu Chaoga's room was open. His father's voice came from inside. He didn't go in but went to his study on the 3rd floor. He picked up the phone on the desk and saw that there were several missed calls. However, none of these people were worthy of him calling back. He rummaged through the phone book and dialed the person he wanted. Very soon, the call was connected. The person smiled and said, Young Master Jiang, how come you have the time to call an uncouth man like me? The weather is good today. I'm going to ask Mr. Du out for a few rounds. I wonder if Mr. Du has time. That's too bad. Today, one of my brothers is getting married. I have to go and help him. The wedding date can't be changed. How about? Young Master Jiang, let's postpone it for 2 more days. Then postpone it for 2 more days. The smile on Jiang Zhuliu's face gradually faded. Mr. Du, why did you stop on the small matter I asked you to do? Small matter? What small matter? Du Qing asked. Fang Yan. A high school Chinese teacher. Jiang Zhuliu cursed in his heart. This old fox. Wait until you beg me one day. See how I'll torture you. Oh, my young Master Jiang. It would have been better if you didn't mention it. Now that you mention it, I have to complain to you. Didn't you ask me to do that matter? I didn't think much and handed it over to my reliable brother. But guess what? Jiang Zhuliu didn't answer. He hated this way of talking that deliberately left people hanging. If Du Qing was his subordinate, he would have smashed him with the club. They've come to find us. Du Qing understood Jiang Zhuliu's personality. He didn't starve him for too long and said the answer himself. Not only did he come, he also brought a big shot that I can't afford to offend. Jiang Zhuliu smiled and said, Mr. Du, you're too humble. In Huacheng, is there anyone that you can't afford to offend? Oh, my young Master Jiang, you're putting me on a stove. I come from a small family. There are many people in Huacheng that I can't afford to offend. I can't afford to offend you, young Master Jiang. That brat brought Lu Gong to my door. Old Lu scolded me harshly, and I apologized to him. I even used my old tree big red gown to compensate him. Tell me, what the hell is going on? Lu Gong. Jiang Zhuliu was thinking about the background behind this name. The Prime Minister of the academic world. The former Prime Minister personally evaluated it, Du Qing reminded. Hearing Du Qing's words, Jiang Zhuliu had an impression. That old man was indeed an anomaly. He didn't have any power or influence, and the highest position he had was the principal of a school. However, he had devoted himself to the education of Guangnan for decades and had students all over the world. If one thought about it carefully, Jiang Zhulu was also his student. Of course, some students were willing to acknowledge him as their teacher, but there were also students who were unwilling to acknowledge him as their teacher. Jiang Zhulu was clearly the type of person who was unwilling to admit defeat. What's the relationship between Lu Gong and that kid? Lu Gong is that kid's grandfather. In that case, Boss Du has no way of chasing him out of watching? Eldest young Master Jiang, old Lu has come knocking on my door. No matter what, I have to give him some face. For someone like old Lu, if he's determined on something, no one can compete with him. Eldest young Master Jiang, isn't he just a high school teacher? What kind of waves can he create? Let's just let this matter go. You say, human psychology is really strange. Jiang Zhulu chuckled and said, if it's in the past, I really didn't think much of that kid. I just said it casually, thinking that what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve. Since this kid is so good at jumping around, I really want to arm wrestle with him. This time, he has no choice but to leave. Ha ha ha, eldest young Master Jiang is really bold. No wonder people say that the new generation excels the old. I, old Du, can't accept that I'm getting old. Boss Du, if there's a chance, let's play golf together, Jiang Zhulu said. Definitely, definitely. After hanging up the phone, Jiang Zhulu stood at the window and fell into deep thought. Fang Yan. He muttered these two words. Teacher Fang Yan was very troubled right now. Ever since his Sparrow Bridge version of Farewell to Cambridge Again and learning Rainy Alley in a Rainy Alley became popular, it caused the whole school to discuss it. The students liked this novel and interesting teaching method, and the parents thought it was the model of quality education in the new era. After learning these two poems, the 9th class students' interest in poetry was unprecedentedly high. The latest issue of Rosefinch School magazine published 3 poems, 2 of which were written by the 9th class students. One was the work of Qin Yitian, and the other was the work of Huang Haoran. The prose and short story section also had several works by the 9th class students. Many parents came to the door, hoping to transfer their children from other classes to the 9th class. In the past, everyone tried their best to send their children to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd class, the 3 elite classes. Now, because of the existence of the language teacher, Fang Yan, there were even some students from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd classes who wanted to transfer to the 9th class. Fang Yan wasn't the teacher in charge of the 9th class, so he didn't have the right to decide whether a student should stay or not. However, some parents were anxious, thinking that Fang Yan was also a teacher in the school and could definitely help solve this problem. Fang Yan usually rejected such requests. His own job wasn't stable, how could he have the ability to transfer other children's classes? Because of the class-hopping craze brought about by Fang Yan, he became the public enemy of all the teachers in the school. Isn't that kid good at making trouble? I want to see how his students can score during the mock test. Students should be down to earth. What's the point of doing all those fancy things? Harming others and oneself. Swimming in the Sparrow River, strolling in the Rainy Alley, who's to blame if there's a problem? The teachers were unconvinced. Why was it that after working for so many years and being so experienced in the industry, a young man like him could seduce our students with just a few tricks? The teacher in charge of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd class, these 3 top classes, were even more prejudiced against Fang Yan, feeling that he had stolen their limelight. One had to know that the so-called top class was to provide the best students with the best teachers. These 3 classes recruited students based on their grades, and no one was allowed to break the rules. This rule was set by the old principal, Lu Gong, when he was the principal. If he didn't do this, then the principal's son, the vice principal's son, the mayor's daughter, the vice mayor's niece, and all the other high-ranking officials would all send in a relative or friend's child. How could the top class still be a role model? This was also the reason why Jin Guodong, the director's son, Li Mingxiang's son, Li Yang, and the teacher in charge of the 9th class, Chen Dahai's son, Chen Tao, were not able to enter the small class and could only be assigned to the 9th class. It was fine if the teachers from other classes hated Fang Yan. After all, they were direct competitors. The problem was, even the teacher in charge of the 9th class, Chen Dahai, hated Fang Yan to the core. Chen Dahai had repeatedly lost in front of Fang Yan. This was nothing new. The worst thing was, he had been the teacher in charge for so long, and those students had never thought of transferring to him. Now, Fang Yan had only been here for a month, and those students were fighting to be the first to vote. Wasn't it obvious who was better and who was worse? Therefore, Chen Dahai's heart was filled with anger, and he looked like he could explode at any time. Fang Yan turned a blind eye to his aggressive attitude. During class and after school, when he ate, he didn't even put him in his eyes. This made Chen Dahai feel even more insulted. When Fang Yan was standing on the podium, a boy stood at the door of the classroom. Reporting. The boy shouted with a clear voice. Fang Yan turned around and was stunned by the boy's handsome appearance. Isn't this guy the young version of Louis Koo? When Louis Koo and Li Ruodong acted in The Legend of the Condor Heroes, he was still a pretty boy. Later, he took the self-deprecating route, which made him one of the 3 most influential black stars in Hong Kong. Wow, it's Tang Cheng. A girl exclaimed. Tang Tang. Why is he in our class? Isn't he in the first class? What is this guy doing here? Fang Yan frowned. It seemed that this guy was very famous. What's the matter? Fang Yan asked. I'm here to report. Tang Cheng said with a smile. When he grinned, 2 charming dimples immediately appeared on his face. So handsome. Another group of infatuated girls exclaimed. Report? Fang Yan looked at Tang Cheng and said, Are you a student of the 9th class? From now on, yes. Tang Cheng handed over the paper in his hand and said, This has Principal Zhang's signature. It's Principal Zhang again. Fang Yan cursed in his heart. This old guy pushed Qin Tian over, making him live in fear every day, for fear that if he was not careful, she would take the opportunity to take him down. Now there's Tang Cheng. Does he think that the 9th class is an entertainment company? Handsome boys and beautiful girls kept recommending him to this class. Fang Yan took the paper and looked at it. There was indeed Zhang Xiaofeng's handwritten letter, and it was also stamped with the school's seal. It should be true. Which class were you in before? Fang Yan asked. The first class. Tang Cheng said. Huh. Fang Yan was even more depressed. Another one from the first class, aren't you adding fuel to the fire? Isn't the first class fine? Why did you come to the 9th class? Fang Yan asked. Because. Qin Tian also came. Tang Cheng looked at Qin Tian in the last row of the classroom and said enthusiastically, I was afraid that she would be lonely here. Wow, there was another burst of exclamation. However, this time Fang Yan didn't understand what the students were shouting about. They came to find Qin Tian. What does it have to do with you? Besides, he said that he was worried that Qin Tian would be lonely in the 9th class. Didn't he mean that except for him, Tang Cheng, no one else was worthy to be Qin Tian's friend? This kid's tone was really arrogant. Of course, I also want to know the famous teacher Fang Yan in the school. Tang Cheng took the initiative to extend his hand to Fang Yan, and got along with Fang Yan with the etiquette of an adult and said, Mr. Fang, please advise me in the future. Fang Yan hesitated a little, but still reached out and shook hands with him. Soon, he felt a strong force coming towards him. You know martial arts? Fang Yan looked at Tang Cheng with some surprise. Chapter 62. A person who knows martial arts is what we call a person who practices martial arts. In Yanjing dialect, it refers to a person who practices martial arts. Tangxing's ancestors used to make a living as escorts. They would escort the important goods of their clients to travel far and wide, climb black mountains and cross dangerous rivers. It was common for them to encounter 3 to 5 robbers or some petty thieves. This required the escort to be highly skilled. It would not be a problem for them to fight 3 to 5 people at once. Now, the Tang family started off as a logistics company. They had hundreds of cargo ships that passed through Huaqing's major ports to various parts of the world. They were a famous shipping tycoon in Huaqing. Although the Tang family's method of escorting had changed, the Tang family's pursuit of martial arts and strength had never stopped. Influenced by his ancestors, Tangxing also developed a strong interest in this area. Moreover, Tangxing was quite talented in this area. He could be considered one of the best among the younger generation of the Tang family. In a one-on-one fight, no one his age could beat him. Even in his father's generation, there were very few people who could beat him. Tangxing was handsome and had an outstanding temperament. Coupled with the nurturing and influence of his good family background, he was knowledgeable and versatile. He was the vice president of the school's martial arts club and a key member of the school's basketball team. At this age, Tangxing was the school's most dazzling star. He was also the Prince Charming in the hearts of countless girls who had just experienced their first awakening of love. If Qi Tian was the well-deserved queen of the school belle of Rosefinch Secondary, then Tangxing was the undisputed school hunk of Rosefinch Secondary, tall, rich, and handsome. The two of them entered the first class of Rosefinch Secondary with the best results. They came from good families and looked good together. Everyone thought they were a match made in heaven. Even Tangxing himself thought so. He felt that Qi Tian was the one for him. Under Tangxing's deliberate efforts, his relationship with Qi Tian was indeed closer than others. Even Qi Tian, who never ate with anyone, accepted his invitation and attended his birthday party. While he was indulging in the present and looking forward to their beautiful future, Qi Tian suddenly skipped work. This matter was tantamount to a blow to his head. Why did Qi Tian skip work for no reason? If Qi Tian wanted to skip work, why didn't he discuss it with him? It would have been fine if he had informed them in advance. Tangxing was also a rather arrogant boy. He didn't immediately confront Qi Tian in a fit of rage. Instead, through his friend's open and secret investigations, he received a piece of news that made him want to vomit blood. Qi Tian had jumped to Class 9 because he liked Class 9's language teacher, Fang Yan. It was said that on the first day, she launched a love attack on Fang Yan in front of everyone. Tangxing had seen Fang Yan before, but he had never thought of greeting him. In his opinion, a person like Fang Yan was just a clown trying to please the crowd. In a school with a strict hierarchy, what could a young man without a strong background and without studying abroad do? Either he would lower his body and sink into the abyss and wait until the opportunity was ripe, or he had enough experience to get a promotion. Or he would walk to the other extreme like Fang Yan. Tangxing didn't appreciate the latter. With his father's help, Tangxing was able to transfer to Class 9 as he wished. It was difficult to jump from another class to a lower class, but to transfer from a lower class to Class 9. This was difficult for many people in the school to understand, and it was something that had never happened in Rosefinch Secondary's many years of existence. Especially the teacher of Class 1, Lin Lin, the old woman who was in the midst of menopause, wanted to throw Fang Yan to the ground and tear off a few pieces of flesh from his body. Qi Tian left, Tangxing also left. Was Class 1 still Class 1 now? If other people followed suit, where would she hide her face as the teacher? Tangxing knew that Qi Tian was a proud girl, and he knew what kind of boy she liked. He followed her here, stood next to Fang Yan, and was better than him in every aspect. At least in appearance, he had a great advantage. If he made Fang Yan lose face a few more times, would she still like a man like this? Definitely not. Therefore, Tangxing wanted to use his advantage to give Fang Yan a taste of his own medicine. He wanted him to be in so much pain that he couldn't stand up straight, and he wanted him to roll on the ground. Something's not right, Tangxing thought in his mind. When a person is attacked by an external force, the body will naturally adopt a defensive posture. In other words, when Tangqing forcefully held Fang Yan's hand, Fang Yan should also use a corresponding amount of force to prevent himself from getting hurt. However, Fang Yan didn't do that. If Tangqing's hand was iron, then Fang Yan's hand that was held in his hand was a ball of cotton. No matter how much strength he used, Fang Yan's hand was limp, and he could not resist at all. Cotton can't break iron, but can iron flatten cotton? Even if it was flattened, the cotton would bounce back again and return to its original state. Fang Yan looked calm and said with a smile, "Welcome Tangqing to Class 9. Class 9 is a warm family, except for Zhenguodong, Li Yang, and Shen Tao, these three flies." Puff, the three people who were watching the fun in the back row were all shot. Fang Yan called them flies in front of the whole class. Their faces were flushed red, and they felt so ashamed that they wanted to crawl into a hole to hide themselves. They knew that if Fang Yan's words were spread, they were afraid that from today onwards, the school hedonist trio would change their name to the School Flies Trio. The School Flies Trio, was there a worse nickname than this? Think about those disgusting little things flying around in front of you. I'm afraid you wouldn't even be able to eat. Shen Tao was about to stand up and curse, but he was pulled back by Zhenguodong. After all, Zhenguodong was born in a merchant family, and his scheming was deeper than Shen Tao and Li Yang. He knew that a little impatience would spoil great plans. The other students are very good. They are like diligent and cute little bees, waving their wings every day to collect pollen and make nectar. They are our closest friends. Everyone laughed. If Fang Yan had just described them as little bees, they wouldn't have thought that it would be a surprise. However, he first described Zhenguodong and the other two as flies, and then said that the others were bees. When comparing the two, the comedic effect was quite obvious. Many people looked at Zhenguodong, Li Yang, and Shen Tao with mocking expressions. Zhenguodong and the other two held their heads high as if nothing had happened, but in their hearts, they were extremely vexed, embarrassed, and angry. Tangqing did not laugh. Not only did he not laugh, but a hint of anxiety appeared in his eyes. No matter how much strength he used, he could not hurt Fang Yan at all. Steel was still steel, and cotton was still cotton. He felt that his palm was getting harder and hotter. Even his uncle, Tang Yi, the martial arts fanatic who had practiced the Tang family style for decades and reached the god realm, would also be a little abnormal when he competed with him in strength. Fang Yan did not. It was as if he did not grab his hand at all, or rather, he was not grabbing his hand at all. It's only right for me to teach you. You're the student, and I'm the teacher. I have the responsibility to pass on the knowledge I know to you. A master can lead you through the door, but cultivation depends on the individual. Just like Zhenguodong, Li Yang, and Shen Tao, I tried very hard to teach them, but they were unwilling to learn. It's as if I was trying to kill them by forcing them to learn. To put it bluntly, what does it have to do with me whether they learn or not? Am I right? Zhenguodong and the other two were shot in the chest once again. Tangqing did not answer. He was still exerting his strength. He was exerting his strength to show Fang Yan his strength. But why was this guy not reacting at all? Tangqing, I don't think you're a bad person. You'd better not hang out with those three flies. They're notorious in school now. Other than their kind, the flies, no other students are willing to hang out with them. Don't let them ruin you. Li Yang was about to cry. Teacher, I'm your student too, alright? Don't bully me like this, okay? If you insult me like this in public, my dad will fight you to death if he finds out. Fang Yan seemed to have heard Li Yang's inner voice. He shook hands with Tangqing as he turned around to look at the back row and said, I'm sure you guys are not convinced by what I said. Now, in front of everyone, I'll give you a chance. You give me a reason to respect you and I'll immediately apologize to you in front of everyone. And I'll take back everything I've said just now. Zhenguodong, Li Yang, and Shen Tao looked at each other and thought seriously. No one came to mind. Fang Yan sighed softly and said, I don't ask you to respect your teachers and unite with your classmates. I don't ask you to have high personal quality and cultivation. Even if you have the cheek to say that you're filial to your parents at home, I'm willing to pretend to believe you. I can't verify this kind of thing, can I? But you don't even dare to say this, don't even dare to tell a lie. Is this the only advantage you have? The reason you don't dare to say it is not because you don't want to lie. It's because you don't realize that this is a virtue worthy of respect. Am I right? Fang Yan turned to look at Tangqing and said, Student Tangqing, take this as a warning. You're all students, and the first task now is to improve your studies. Don't learn from Zheng Guodong and the other two, always playing tricks behind the scenes to harm teachers and bully classmates. Fang Yan leaned close to Tangqing and whispered, Let us father and son have a private word. Even if you want to beat me up, you have to learn the skill first before you do it, right? Tangqing stared with his eyes wide open. Does this guy understand everything? He stepped back and wanted to loosen his grip, but found that his hand couldn't break free from Fang Yan's grip. Fang Yan's palm, which was as soft as cotton a moment ago, suddenly became as hot as steel. A ferocious force crazily surged into his palm. Plop! Tangqing's knees went soft, and his body knelt down in front of Fang Yan. Fang Yan hurriedly bent down to help him up, and said reproachfully, How can you worship a teacher like this? It's not popular now. This kid is touched. Chapter 63. Because Fang Yan was reprimanding the three flies, Zheng Guodong, Li Yang, and Shen Tao, everyone's eyes were on the three of them. Some students noticed that Fang Yan and Tangqing shook hands for too long, but they didn't think too much about it. What's so great about a teacher shaking hands with a student for a long time? Didn't they see that they were talking? However, as they were talking, Tangqing suddenly knelt down in front of Fang Yan, which surprised them. Why did he kneel down for no reason? What era is this? Do people have to kowtow and kneel when they come to be apprentices? Is it really like what Mr. Fang Yan said, that Tangqing was touched by his earnest and well-meaning teachings? Tangqing is indeed a man of etiquette, the boys thought in their hearts. They heard that he was born in a martial arts family, so he paid more attention to etiquette than others. His kneeling posture is so handsome. No wonder he's the most handsome boy in Rosefinch Secondary. The girls naturally had their own thoughts. Although they all knew that the person Tangqing liked was Qin Tian, who was sitting in the last row of the classroom, it was also pleasing to the eye and motivating to learn, wasn't it? It was a pity that Tangqing was suffering in silence. His right hand was still held in Fang Yan's hand. His hand, which was soft as if he could crush it with just a little bit of force, had now become hard and hot. An irresistible force surged towards him, suppressing him so much that he couldn't move his body or speak. Even breathing had become extremely difficult. Seal. This was the seal that his grandfather had mentioned. When encountering an opponent with a great disparity in strength, the opponent could completely seal you off, making you unable to feel that you were still alive. Although the current state of his body was a little different from what his grandfather had described, he knew that Fang Yan had used the seal state on him. Now, he could do nothing but watch as Fang Yan used him as a prop to put on a one-man show. Fang Yan bowed slightly, one hand holding Tangqing's palm, the other holding his left arm, looking as if he was trying very hard to pull him up. He said, Student Tangqing, I can understand your intentions, but you really don't need to be so courteous. Since you came here with the principal's letter of introduction, I naturally have to accept you as my student. Just like I said, as long as you don't be led astray by students like Zheng Guodong. Zheng Guodong, Li Yang, and Shen Tao wanted to hug each other and cry. Fang Yan glanced around the classroom and said, There's a table in the last row. You can go and sit there. The seat Fang Yan mentioned was next to Qin Tian, and there was only one empty seat there. Now, all the empty tables in the class were used up. If there were more students who transferred here, Fang Yan would have to ask them to go to the logistics department to get their own tables and chairs, or move the tables and chairs from their previous class over. However, Fang Yan was thinking whether he should make a suggestion to the school leaders to prohibit students from small classes from transferring to the 9th class. What would happen if they kept moving around? While speaking, Fang Yan also released the palm that was holding Tangqing's hand. His palm was free, and Tangqing's body immediately regained its strength. He wanted to throw a punch at Fang Yan and fight him to the death. It was humiliating. It was too humiliating. However, he thought about it again and again, and finally didn't make this decision. Just like what Fang Yan said in his ear, if you want to beat him up, you have to learn the skills first, right? Fang Yan's performance today was unfathomable. Before he understood him thoroughly, he couldn't make any reckless moves. If he beat Fang Yan in front of so many people, then, soon, he would become the 4th fly, in the eyes of Fang Yan and all the students. After all, Fang Yan's identity as a teacher had a natural advantage. If he didn't give enough respect, it would be disrespecting his teacher. This was a serious crime in ancient times, enough to destroy a person's reputation and future. Tangqing wanted to say something, but his throat moved, but he couldn't say anything. His legs were still weak, and his hand that was shaking kept shaking. He was a loser, and a loser shouting at a winner would only make others look down on him. Originally, he wanted to give Fang Yan a show of strength, but he didn't expect to be kicked to the ground. His forehead was dripping with sweat, and he walked to the last row of the classroom with a depressed expression. He sat next to Qinitian, and there was only a narrow aisle between them. What are you doing here? Qinitian held a pencil between his fingers, and his movements were smooth and graceful. Ho Xiaolong, who was next to him, liked Qinitian's leisurely and lazy posture when he turned the pencil, but he was too embarrassed to stare at it, so he could only sneak a glance from time to time with a guilty look. Tangqing was beaten by Fang Yan and even knelt down in public. He was very discouraged and lost his fighting spirit. He said, "I'll accompany you." "I don't need you to accompany me," Qinitian said. "Go back. Class 1 is more suitable for you." If Qinitian said such words to him in the past, Tangqing would be indifferent. Because she was such a character. She said what she thought without considering your feelings. Or, your feelings had nothing to do with her. Tangqing had long been used to her way of speaking. But today, after being hit by Fang Yan, he was particularly sad to hear Qinitian's words. After sitting for a long time, Tangqing's mood gradually calmed down. He turned to look at Qinitian and said, "Do you like him?" "If you mean Fang Yan." Qinitian smiled. "Yes." Tangqing's heart sank. Ho Xiaolong, who was sitting next to Qinitian and eavesdropping on their conversation, also felt his heart sink. "It's not like this. The story is not like this." Ho Xiaolong roared in his heart. He was a fan of novels and had read many stories such as, "My Desk Mate is the Campus Belle," and, "The Beautiful Campus Belle Falls in Love with Me." In those stories, the male protagonists were generally ordinary little losers. However, by chance, they became entangled with the most beautiful campus belle in the whole school and even became desk mates. At first, of course, the campus belle looked down on them. However, after a long time of dating, their little universe began to explode. Their advantages were magnified infinitely. The campus belle loved them so much that she couldn't extricate herself. All kinds of tall, rich, and handsome men came to challenge them, but they were beaten into pieces. Ho Xiaolong was fully prepared to fall in love with the campus belle. However, how did Qinitian fall in love with the teacher? He had never read a story like, "The teacher falls in love with the campus belle." "What do you like about him?" Tangqing tried to keep himself calm and asked in a low voice. Qinitian thought for a moment and said, "I don't find anything that I don't like." Tangqing knew that Qinitian rarely gave such a high evaluation to a boy. Nothing that he didn't like? That meant he liked everything? You should know. Tangqing wanted to laugh. He wanted to say this sentence in a relaxed and teasing tone. In this way, even if Qinitian was angry, he could say that it was just a joke. However, he couldn't laugh no matter what. His expression was so serious. The school prohibits relationships between teachers and students. Whoosh! The tip of the pen drew a breathtaking arc and then stopped between two of Chinitian's fingers. She tilted her head and looked at Tangcheng. She said, "Is this a problem? Isn't it?" The previous language teacher of the 9th class was fired because he had an ambiguous relationship with a student. Fang Yan. Does he dare? If he can make me fall in love with him, I will immediately quit school and wait for him. If he is fired because he is in a relationship with me, then I will earn money to support the family. Chinitian said with his mouth twitching. Tangcheng's words were nothing to her. Chinitian. Tangcheng couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. It was as if he had experienced the betrayal of the person he loved the most. Although they had never promised each other. However, she should be his. Everyone thought so. Chinitian waved his hand and said, "Tangcheng, I won't fall in love with you. I've known this for a long time. I also told you." "Why?" Tangcheng clenched his fists. "Childish." Chinitian said. "You said I am childish? I can change. I am still young. I can definitely become mature." Tangcheng said eagerly. He was willing to try. He still wanted to keep her. The school belle and the school hunk should hold hands until they grew old. How could they break up just like that? Could they live up to this title and the expectations of the students? "I mean, the question you asked is childish," Chinitian said. "If I like it, I like it. If I don't like it, I don't like it. There is no why, only if I want to." Chinitian looked at Tangcheng and persuaded again, "Tangcheng, go back. We will still be friends." "I will never go back," Tangcheng said, gnashing his teeth. "I won't give up like this. I want to compete with him. I must defeat him. I want to let you know that I am a better man than him. I am the most suitable person for you. He can't. He can't give you anything, he can't help you with anything." Tangcheng. Chinitian. Fang Yan stood on the podium and scolded. These two people chattered non-stop. He had been aiming at them for a long time. "Don't talk during class." Tangcheng felt as if an arrow had pierced his heart. "I am confessing. Please don't disturb others at this time, okay?" It was very rude. Chinitian giggled and said, "He can forbid you to talk during class." "Can you forbid him to talk during class? You see, he is still better than you, right?" Chapter 64. The Tea People's Commune. The house had not been renovated for a long time and looked a bit old and decayed. A few shabby tables and chairs were placed randomly and did not have any sense of beauty. Secluded and clean, these were probably the few advantages of this tea house. There were no other customers in the tea house, except for Fang Yan who had just walked in. There was only a tea house waiter who was lying on a rattan chair and dozing off. Fang Yan deliberately increased his footsteps, wanting to wake the tea house waiter up. Unexpectedly, the waiter was sleeping soundly. He did not know if he heard the footsteps, but he just turned over and continued to sleep. Fang Yan had no choice but to shout, "Waiter, give me a pot of Longjing tea." The waiter finally woke up. He was a middle-aged man in his 30s with slightly curly hair and a pale face. He wiped the water stains from the corner of his mouth, adjusted the glasses on the bridge of his nose, looked at Fang Yan and asked, "What do you want?" "A pot of Longjing tea," Fang Yan said again. "No," the waiter said. "Then what tea do you have here?" Fang Yan asked. "Do you want Maojian tea?" "Only Maojian tea. We grow it at home and stir-fry it by hand." The middle-aged waiter began to advertise his product. Fang Yan carefully looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "Are you the boss?" The middle-aged man smiled bitterly and said, "Also a waiter." "What's your name?" Fang Yan asked. "Zhu Jian," the middle-aged man said. Fang Yen stood up again and walked in front of the middle-aged man. He said with a smile, "I'm Fang Yen. I'm the one who asked you to meet. Mr. Fang?" Zhu Jian looked at Fang Yen with a face full of shock. "You are Mr. Fang Yen?" Zhu Jian could not help but be surprised. Zhu Jian received a phone call today. The caller claimed to be the current Chinese teacher of Class 9 of Rosefinch High School, Fang Yen. Although Zhu Jian did not want to have any contact with that school, the other party repeatedly persuaded him and said that he could find a way to help him restore his reputation. Zhu Jian hesitated again and finally agreed to meet with Fang Yen. That matter was like a thin and long thorn stuck in his throat, making him unable to eat or sleep peacefully. The heavy burden of seducing a female student made him almost unable to lift his head in front of his family and friends. He needed relief. He needed a chance to travel light. Fang Yan's words hit the nail on the head, making it hard for him to refuse. He originally thought that Fang Yan would be a middle-aged man like him. However, wasn't this young man in front of him a little too young and immature? Isn't Rosefinch High School an elite school? How could he just randomly recruit people? "It's me," Fang Yan said. He saw the doubt in Zhu Jian's eyes and said, "Shall we sit down and talk?" "I'll make you a cup of tea," Zhu Jian said. Maojian tea was not as fragrant as Tai Guanyin, not as delicate and graceful as Longjing tea, but it had its own unique charm. The tiny hairs rolled a few times in the boiling water and slowly unfolded. A layer of fine white hair floated up and down in the glass. At first glance, it looked like the tea had not been cleaned. In fact, this white hair was the essence of Maojian tea. People who loved tea called it baihao because it contained rich substances that were beneficial to the human body. When drinking tea, these baihao should be drunk into the stomach. Fang Yen picked up the glass and took a sip of tea. He carefully felt it and said with a smile, "Good tea." Zhu Jian was expressionless and didn't care about Fang Yan's praise. How many of the words spoken on the surface could be trusted? If I guessed correctly, these tea trees grow on the top of the mountain. They are exposed to the wind and rain and the sun, so the leaves don't look green and the tea looks old. Fang Yen took another sip and commented, "However, the person who picked the tea was very diligent. Every tea leaf was only taken from the tender shoots. The essence of the tea tree was all plucked. The person who fried the tea was also an expert. He used charcoal ash to roast the tea leaves. He didn't use too much fire and didn't use too much strength, retaining the tenderness of the tea tips and the natural fragrance of the tea leaves. As you said, although he didn't add any spices or tea essences, the taste of the tea was better." Zhu Jian was deeply shocked and said, "Mr. Fang is an expert in the tea ceremony. This tea was planted by my old father. The tea mountain he got was on the top of the mountain. It was difficult to water the tea trees on the top of the mountain. It happened that the weather in southern Hunan was dry these years, so the color of the tea leaves was gray and ugly. In order to sell it at a good price, I asked my parents to only take the tip, which is the tender shoots of the tea tree, and then roast them myself. Later, I lost my job and remembered that I liked to drink tea. I opened a tea house at the entrance of this residential area. As you can see, because of the lack of capital and the remote location, it is very difficult to make a living." Just now, Zhu Jian looked down on and doubted Fang Yen, but now he didn't have the mentality of half-heartedly because of his young face. Fang Yen smiled and said, "I didn't come here to taste tea with Mr. Zhu. I think Mr. Zhu doesn't have the mood to taste tea now." Zhu Jian smiled bitterly and said, "Indeed." Fang Yen looked at Zhu Jian and asked, "Mr. Zhu, is the rumor in the school true?" Zhu Jian didn't answer. He just looked at Fang Yen thoughtfully and said, "I don't understand. Why did you come to ask me this question? Whose position do you represent?" "Yourself? Rosefinch High School?" "I represent myself," said Fang Yen. "Because of sympathy? Or curiosity?" "Sympathy and curiosity." "I'm also curious," Fang Yen said frankly. "And understanding." Understanding? The understanding that we are in the same boat, said Fang Yan. What do you mean? Zhu Jian was puzzled. Some time ago, I was almost expelled because I danced with a female student in a bar. Of course, if the media reported it, I am afraid it would not be a simple expulsion, said Fang Yan. You danced with a female student in a bar? Zhu Jian looked at Fang Yan with vigilance and contempt. What kind of person is this? Do you think I am the same as you? That's why you came to seek comfort. There's another story, explained Fang Yan. It's actually very simple. It's not as dirty as people think. Why didn't the media report it? Zhu Jian asked. Don't the media love this kind of news? Because a lot of honest people stood up for me. Fang Yan played with the glass in his hand and said with a smile. They didn't believe that I would do such a thing. Seems like you are much luckier than me, Zhu Jian sighed. His incident was made known to everyone, causing him to be ostracized by the entire watching education circle. The female student was even more unwilling to be humiliated and transferred to another city to study. He knew they were innocent, but who would believe it? I don't deny that, said Fang Yan. My luck has always been good. Because you've been wronged before, so you want to come and listen to my story. If possible, will you help me reverse the verdict? The most important thing is to prove your innocence, said Fang Yan. This accusation is too heavy. If it's on someone's head, they won't be able to relax for the rest of their lives. And that female student. Although I have never seen her. But if she was really wronged, then this incident may destroy her. Yes. Zhu Jian's face was filled with pain. He covered his face with both hands, and tears flowed through the gaps between his slender fingers. His fingers were wet, and the tears flowed to the back of his hand. Destroy her. Fang Yan sighed softly. After a long time, Zhu Jian moved his hands away from his face. There were still traces of tears in his eyes. I can tell you clearly that we are innocent, said Zhu Jian. I swear on my personality. No, my everything. I believe you. Fang Yan nodded. What the hell happened? You are the homeroom teacher of class 9. Do you know Zheng Guodong? Asked Zhu Jian. Yes. Fang Yan nodded. Does it have anything to do with him? I had many conflicts with Mr. Fang when I first became the homeroom teacher of class 9. He skipped class to drink, beat up classmates, and was the bully of the class. And he had dealings with some gangsters in the society. The way he did things didn't seem like a student. He was molesting a female student by the Sparrow River, and I happened to see him. I yelled at him and chased him away. Then, I took off my coat and put it on the girl. I didn't expect this scene to be taken by someone, and it became the evidence of me hugging a female student and having an affair by the river. Zhu Jian punched the thick table and roared, I, Zhu Jian, have read a lot of books. Why would I do such a beastly thing? Have you explained this to the school? Asked Fang Yan. Who would believe it? Zhu Jian roared with red eyes. Who would believe it? Zheng Guodong's father is on the board of the school. Who would believe it? Fang Yan was silent. Zhu Jian's situation was indeed tricky. On one hand, he had been photographed, just like himself. On the other hand, he was more careless than himself because his jacket was on the girl. He walked out of the forest with the girl in his arms. If he said he had nothing to do with the girl, very few people would believe him. Of course, if that was the case, if Zhu Jian and the girl who was hurt stood out to accuse Zheng Guodong at the same time, there was still a chance to reverse the situation. The most important problem was that Zheng Guodong's father, Zheng Tiancheng, was on the board of the Rosefinch School. Who would be willing to offend Zheng Tiancheng and still stand out to reverse the case for Zhu Jian when the evidence was conclusive? I believe it, said Fang Yan with a serious expression. I believe you are innocent. Zhu Jian looked at Fang Yan with a surprised expression. I will help you reverse the case, I will prove your innocence, continued Fang Yan. Why? Asked Zhu Jian. He had already made it very clear that Jing Guodong's father was Jing Tiancheng. Why was he still willing to risk his life? If he offended Jing Tiancheng because of him, would he still be able to stay and be the language teacher of class 9? He was afraid that he would end up being expelled from the school like him, right? Because we are all scholars, Fang Yan said with a straight face. They don't believe that scholars are righteous, and that scholars have integrity. I believe it. Chapter 65. What was the demeanor of a scholar? Every historian would record good and evil deeds. This was the demeanor of a scholar. Some things should be done and some things should not be done. This was the demeanor of a scholar. Doing one's best and dying one's last was the demeanor of a scholar. Worrying about the worries of the world first and enjoying the joys of the world later was also the demeanor of a scholar. Seeing injustice on the road, pulling out a sword to help, was also the demeanor of a scholar. Of course, Fang Yan did not have a sword in his hand. The sword was in his heart. Times had changed and science and technology had developed. If he still called himself a scholar, he would be scolded for being stupid. However, in this world, there were always some things that were worth sticking to. From Chu Yuan to Han Fei, from Sima Qian to Ban Gu, from Ji Kong to Tao Qian, from Li Du to the 8 great families. From Xian Qiji to Fang Xiaoru, from Wang Fuji to Gong Zizhen. From Lu Gong to Fang Yan. These people had made Huaxia culture go back to ancient times. These people had propped up the backbone of Huaxia's national literature. Scholars were originally a great and noble profession, but why had they become worthless in the eyes of many people? Had people's hearts changed, or was society sick? Fang Yan and Zhu Jian were not related, so he could completely throw his affairs aside and ignore them. However, he still decided to get involved. To restore the reputation of a good teacher, to seek justice for a female student, and at the same time, to give those bad people a punishment, to let them know that heaven's net has a long way to go. Fang Yan still had a faint worry in his heart. He had also had many conflicts with Jing Guodong, Chen Tao, and Li Yang. He knew that with his ability, there was no way to awaken their minds and urge them to mend their ways. And they were also unwilling to give up after the last humiliation. The relationship between teachers and students was so bad that a big conflict was inevitable. Last time, they were able to drive Zhu Jian away with a vicious scheme, causing him to lose his reputation. Next time, would they be merciful to him? They often suffered from Fang Yan's sarcasm and attacks, but they stubbornly refused to change classes. Wasn't it to give him a fatal blow? How could Fang Yan not know what they were thinking and how they were glaring at him with evil eyes? Thank you for your kindness. Zhu Jian poured out his heart. Moreover, he felt much better now that he had gained the trust of his peers. However, Teacher Fang, it's better if you don't get involved in this matter. Too complicated. Because Jing Guodong's father is Jing Tiancheng? Fang Yan asked. Jing Tiancheng is a famous entrepreneur in Huacheng. He is well off and has a wide network. We are just poor teachers. How can we be his match? Zhu Jian shook his head and smiled bitterly. He was afraid that he would drag Fang Yan down with him. If that was the case, he would feel even more guilty and uneasy. Besides, it's been so long. We don't have any witnesses, and we don't have any material evidence. What can we do to seek justice? In the past, Jing Guodong wouldn't admit it. Now, he won't admit it. Then should we just let the good be wronged and the bad be happy? Fang Yan retorted. No one is willing to offend the bad. If that's the case, won't the bad get worse? Zhu Jian opened his mouth and said, I'm afraid that I'll affect Mr. Fang. To be honest, it's fine if I suffer, but I've already dragged a young girl into it. I can't bring trouble to Mr. Fang. Don't worry. Fang Yan comforted him with a smile. They can't touch me. Zhu Jian looked at Fang Yan in surprise. He didn't understand what he meant. Jing Tiancheng was the school director of Rosefinch Secondary. Many of the school's higher-ups were promoted by him. As long as he said a word, Fang Yan would be kicked out of the school. Why did a little teacher dare to say that they couldn't touch him? Fang Yan pointed a finger at the ceiling and said, "I have someone up there." Zhu Jian understood and said, "You are. Which family's young master are you from? Don't tell anyone." Fang Yan reminded him in a low voice. "I want to keep a low profile." Understood. Zhu Jian nodded. "Why do you want to come to Rosefinch Secondary to teach?" "For a woman," Fang Yan said. "Wasn't it what those hedonistic young masters and rich young masters were supposed to do when they flew into a rage for a beauty? It was the same in movies and TV shows." "Who?" "Lu Chaoga." "Ah." Zhu Jian gasped in shock. This guy actually wanted to hit on the principal. Screech. The black Bentley Continental slowly stopped at the school gate. Lu Chaoga unfastened her seatbelt and was ready to get off. "Shall I take you to school?" Jiang Zhulu asked with a smile. "There's still a long way to go." "No need." Lu Chaoga refused. If she entered the school in such a luxury car, the school would probably stir up gossip about her again. She was a serious and strict woman. She wanted people to know her because of her ability in her work, not because of anything else. "Is there a need to be so careful when everyone knows about it?" Jiang Zhulu said. "Know about what?" Lu Chaoga turned to look at Jiang Zhulu and asked. "Everyone knows that you will be my woman in the future." Jiang Zhulu grinned. When he smiled, 2 deep dimples appeared on his cheeks. It was very charming. A man with an extraordinary background, an outstanding aura, a luxury car, and a luxurious mansion. Such a man could easily make a woman fall for him. However, this was clearly not the dish that Lu Chaoga liked. "Jiang Zhulu." Lu Chaoga's face was cold as she shouted. I understand." Jiang Zhulu smiled and waved his hand. "I know what you want to say. I also know that you don't have that kind of feeling for me now, but there will be a day when you will be conquered by me, right?" "No." Lu Chaoga said. "Jiang Zhulu, you should know very well that many of the things you do will only produce the opposite of the desired effect. For example, putting Jing Jing by your side." Jiang Zhulio's heart was as clear as a mirror. Although Jing Jing doesn't have great wisdom, he still has some tricks up his sleeves. His eyes are sharp, and he can help you do a lot of things in school. This is just one of them. "What else?" "Also, you don't have to do anything for me," Lu Chaoga said. It was a very strange feeling. For a woman, if a man was so gentle and considerate to her, shouldn't she feel very happy? Why didn't she feel this way? Instead, she felt that it was a heavy burden. Every time he did something for her, Lu Chaoga felt that she owed him more, as if she would be letting him down if she didn't marry him in the future. However, Lu Chaoga really couldn't find the feeling of a boyfriend and a girlfriend in him. What kind of feeling is that? Lu Chaoga thought in her heart. She didn't really understand. This sentence is really hurtful. Jiang Zhulu said with a chuckle. If you like someone, you like everything about them. If you don't like someone, you reject everything about them. It seems that I still have a long way to go before I can return the beauty. Lu Chaoga didn't want to say anything more to him because she had already said what she should say countless times. She opened the door and got out of the car. Jiang Zhulu shouted from behind, "Lu Chaoga, remember, you are mine. Not someone else's, and not with the surname Fang or Li. Those hoodlums and clowns, they don't deserve you." Lu Chaoga suddenly turned around and stared sharply at Jiang Zhulio's face. "Your reaction is very intense." Jiang Zhulu laughed. "What? Did I say something right? What are you trying to say?" Lu Chaoga looked at Jiang Zhulu and asked. "Fang Yan, are you familiar with this person?" Jiang Zhulu asked. "Even if you don't want to accept me, you don't need to find a teacher to insult me, right?" Lu Chaoga was furious and said, First, Fang Yan and I are only colleagues. Second, my matter has nothing to do with you. Third, no one is insulting you. It's you who is insulting yourself. I'm relieved to hear the first point. Jiang Zhulu waved his hand toward Lu Chaoga and said, hurry up and go to work. Otherwise, you'll be late. After your car is repaired, I'll have someone fetch it and send it to school. You don't need to go there anymore. I'll get it myself, Lu Chaoga said as she turned around and walked toward the school's gate. Watching Lu Chaoga's swaying back, Jiang Zhulio's eyes were full of appreciation. This woman is my woman. Jiang Zhulu didn't immediately leave. Instead, he rolled down the window and took out a copper cigarette case from his pocket. He took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth to light it. Amidst the lingering smoke, he squinted his eyes and sized up the arched gate of Rosefinch Secondary. This school had his lover, and also his rival in love. It was a very special place for him. However, he had never entered it. It was because of Lu Chaoga's refusal. Every time he sent Lu Chaoga to school, she would force him to stop at the school's gate. He believed that one day, Lu Chaoga would invite him inside. She would hold his arm and accompany him inside. He had been waiting for that day. Therefore, he would never go inside by himself. This was his pride. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. The sun was warm. Students in Rosefinch Secondary's uniform were walking into the campus in groups. There was only half an hour left before the start of class. Jiang Zhulu wasn't interested in those sweet students in school uniforms. Ever since he was a child, he liked women who were older than him. That's right. Lu Chaoga was 3 years older than him. In his mother's words, a woman 3 years older than her husband was a golden brick. This was also the reason why his mother had been encouraging them to get married earlier. Knock knock knock, someone knocked on the window. Jiang Zhulu frowned. To him, knocking on his window was an extremely impolite and disrespectful act. Everyone knew his license plate number. After so many years, no one had ever dared to treat him like this. He turned around and saw a young and handsome face. However, when he smiled, it was extremely annoying. You bullied me before. Do you still remember? The man looked at Jiang Zhulu and asked. It was as casual as a child asking, how much is one bubble gum? Chapter 66. Do you remember that you bullied me before? Jiang Zhulu had once boasted that he was a pervert in front of Jingjing, but he was still stumped by this pervert's question. The eldest young master of the Jiang clan, one of the 4 prodigies of Huaqing, a prominent figure in Huaqing. He bullied many people, but on the surface, everyone pretended that nothing had happened. Wasn't it just a matter of stabbing each other in the dark when one was wandering in Jianghu? If you bullied someone, then so be it. You either think of a way to get it back, or you forget about it. Since Fang Yan had asked so openly, Jiang Zhulu was too embarrassed to feign ignorance and deny it. He stared sharply at Fang Yan and said, Fang Yan? That's me. Fang Yan smiled. It was as if Jiang Zhulu not denying it immediately was something to be happy about. Do you remember now? You got people to bully me. They wanted to beat me, kick me out of school, and ruin my reputation. Jiang Zhulu smiled and said, if you really are that Fang Yan, then that's true. I did bully you. That's too unreasonable, Fang Yan said. I didn't offend you, so how can you bully people as you please? Even if you want to bully someone, you should tell them beforehand so that they're mentally and physically prepared, right? Jiang Zhulu thought about it and said, that's a good suggestion. In the future, when I want to bully someone, I'll send someone to tell them where they're wrong. Then, I'll bully them and let them understand. That's right. Jiang Zhongzhu, one of the 4 prodigies of Huaqing. Just the name alone makes you feel like you're a powerful figure. You can't always do stupid things like this. Otherwise, if people don't know you're the 4 prodigies of Huaqing, they'll think you're the 4 addicts of Huaqing. Don't you know? Jiang Zhulu sized up the audacious guy in front of him with interest and said, "You've offended 4 people with that sentence. Plus, there are countless important people standing behind these 4 people. In other words, you've offended the entire Huacheng. I've read a lot, you can't lie to me." Fang Yan quickly defended himself. "I didn't offend them. I was protecting them. Think about it, you and the other 3 were named the 4 prodigies of Huacheng at the same time. In the end, not only did one of the prodigies fail to show off, but he also kept tarnishing the reputation of the prodigies. When everyone saw this, they would think that the other 3 were the same kind of trash as this guy. Wouldn't they be looking down on the other 3 as well? I'm reminding you to be careful in order to polish the reputation of Flower City's 4 prodigies." What was that saying again? "I'm not afraid of a godlike opponent, but I'm afraid of a pig-like teammate." Don't be angry, I'm not talking about you. You are much stronger than a pig. It's just a metaphor. Think about it, isn't it? That really is the case. Jiang Zhulu smiled. That's why I have to do less stupid things and do more smart things. Cut the Gordian knot with a swift knife, cut the stinky tofu with a swift knife. This is the only way to keep the mess in order, and the stinky tofu won't have a chance to stink. You see, we really hit it off at first sight. You agree with everything I say, and every word you say goes straight to the bottom of my heart. Fang Yan had the excitement of meeting a bosom friend. Let me slap you twice, and from today onwards, we will be good brothers with no secrets. How about that? What kind of person was Jiang Zhulu? How could he let others slap him twice? If someone else said this to him, Jiang Zhulu would immediately jump down and slap them twice. Since Fang Yan said this, it wasn't something that could be resolved with 2 slaps. Seeing that Jiang Zhulu didn't reply, Fang Yan explained, "Actually, I want to be good friends with you right now, but you bullied me in the past. If I don't slap you twice, I will still feel a little uncomfortable in my heart. I can't get over this. If I slap you, we will bury the hatchet and let bygones be bygones. There will be no more barriers or grudges between us, and we will get along easily and happily. Am I right? What if I don't agree?" Jiang Zhulu had a gentle smile on his face, revealing the 2 charming dimples that were his trademark. "You don't cherish me as a friend," Fang Yan said. "Think about what you did to me. You let those hooligans hit me." Jiang Zhulu originally wanted to say that he didn't send those hooligans to provoke him, but was there a need for him to explain to Fang Yan? If he didn't explain, Fang Yan would naturally blame everything on him out of habit. "It's fine if they hit me, but they also came to the school gate to cause trouble. Then, they sent the screenshots of what happened in the bar to those reporters. What if those reporters hype this up? What will happen to me? I will be expelled from school, spurned by my parents, and attacked by the entire society. My reputation will be ruined, and my future will be ruined. I didn't purposely exaggerate the truth, right? It's completely true." Jiang Zhulu nodded. "I return good for evil. I only want to slap you twice. No matter how you look at it, I'm the one who suffered a great loss. This request of mine is not too much, right? Not too much." Jiang Zhulu nodded again. "Then, what other reason do you have to refuse?" Fang Yan said angrily. "Because I don't want to be friends with you," Jiang Zhulu said with incomparable honesty. How could he be friends with someone like Fang Yan? That Fang Yan. How could he have the nerve to say that he wanted to be friends with him? Did he deserve it? Friends? What kind of relationship was a friend? What kind of identity could be a friend? Fang Yan felt a little hurt in his heart and said, "What do you think is bad about me? I don't think you're good at anything." That means my proposal is invalid? It seems so. We can't be friends. We can't be friends. Will you still bully me in the future? Jiang Zhulu didn't want to answer anymore. Was this a conversation between 2 kindergartners? Why can't you understand that being friends with me is such an advantageous thing? Fang Yen shook his head and sighed. His body suddenly pounced forward and jumped into the car through the window. The surface area of the car window was only so big. If one didn't have skills, it wouldn't be easy to maneuver. However, this wasn't a problem for Fang Yen. He sat in the front passenger seat and grabbed Zhang Zhuliu's hair, preventing him from moving his head. Pa! Fang Yen slapped Zhang Zhuliu's left cheek. Zhang Zhuliu's skin was white and tender, and Fang Yen had used too much force. With this slap, Zhang Zhuliu's left cheek immediately turned red and swollen. There was a clear 5-fingered handprint on his cheek. Fang Yan's movements were too fast and ruthless. Caught off guard, Zhang Zhulu was caught by Fang Yen. By the time he reacted and wanted to counterattack, Fang Yen had already grabbed his hair. The more he struggled, the more pain he felt. He opened his mouth and wanted to say a few harsh words, but Fang Yen clearly wasn't willing to give him the chance. Pa! Fang Yen slapped Zhang Zhuliu's mouth again. Zhang Zhulu swallowed back the words he was about to say. Instead, blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Fang Yen had only wanted to slap Zhang Zhuliu's mouth, but his nose was too close to Zhang Zhuliu's mouth. Fang Yan's slap not only broke Zhang Zhuliu's mouth, but it also hit his nose. The bridge of the nose was fragile, and Zhang Zhulu only felt a burning pain in his nose. Then, boiling liquid spurted out. The blood was silent, but it stained the brown steering wheel. It was a ghastly sight. Zhang Zhulu covered his nose with his hand and found it hard to speak. He looked at Fang Yen with eyes full of hatred. Fang Yen felt a little better after the 2 slaps. He chuckled and looked at Zhang Zhulu. If you had agreed to my suggestion, we would have become friends after these 2 slaps. We would have found a small restaurant, ordered 2 dishes, and a bottle of wine. Wouldn't that be great? Since you don't want to be friends with me, then let's do it according to the rules of the enemy. Fang Yen opened the car door and got out. He closed the door with a bang. He leaned against the window and looked at Zhang Zhulu. This matter isn't over yet. Fang Yen waved his hand and said, I still have classes, so I won't accompany you. Next time. Evil people would be tormented by evil people. Fang Yen was using the evil people's way to deal with the evil people. Why did Zhang Zhulu dare to bully Fang Yen? It was because he felt that he was in a superior position. He was just a little teacher. How could he compare to the Zhang family's young master? He could bully you, force you to lose your job, ruin your reputation, and ruin your future. He could take away everything from you with just a word or a glance. This was the benefit of being in a superior position. However, it was impossible for Fang Yen to make him apologize or slap him. In their dictionaries, it was natural for them to bully others. If you bullied them, then it would be a life and death feud. Zhang Zhulu had money and power. Therefore, he could push Fang Yen into the abyss. Fang Yen didn't have a firm foothold in Huacheng. He couldn't do things in a high profile, so he could only use his brute force. I want to beat you up. What can you do? You can't beat me anyway. This was what Fang Yen thought. This was what he thought, and this was what he did. Seeing that Fang Yen was about to leave, Zhang Zhulu hurriedly picked up his phone and made a call. The call went through. A man's deep voice came from the other side. Young Master Zhang, what do you need from me? In a short time, Zhang Zhulu had actually calmed down. He said in a calm voice, Chief Zhang, nothing much. I just wanted to ask when you have time to come over and play a few rounds. I haven't played with Chief Zhang in a long time. After hanging up, Zhang Zhulu covered his bleeding nose and laughed loudly. He looked like he had gone crazy. Chapter 67. When Fang Yen returned to the office, Chen Dahai was chatting with someone in the office. When he saw Fang Yen come in, he snorted coldly and walked out with his teacup. Since the last time the 2 of them had a quarrel in the office, their relationship had become like fire and water. Because Fang Yan and Chen Dehai's relationship was not good, the other teachers in the office also deliberately alienated Fang Yan. Between the two, they chose Chen Dehai, so naturally, they could not be too close to Fang Yan. According to the rules of the workplace, Fang Yan was a newcomer. The leader of the first-year Chinese team should at least lead the whole team to hold a welcome banquet for Fang Yan. However, Jia Siding was closer to Li Ziqiang and the others, and she was very dissatisfied with Fang Yan's unruly behavior, so she selectively forgot about this matter. Others ignored Fang Yan, but Fang Yan took the initiative to greet the other people in the office. "Teacher Li, are you drinking tea?" "Teacher Qin, what happened in the newspaper again?" "Teacher Zheng, the coat you're wearing today really matches your temperament. It makes you look young." Teacher Li, who was drinking tea, continued to drink tea, and Teacher Qin, who was reading the newspaper, continued to read the newspaper. Teacher Zheng, who heard Fang Yan praise his coat, nodded at Fang Yan, and then couldn't help but take a mirror from the drawer to admire it carefully. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was. He thought that Fang Yan was not good in other aspects, but his taste was not picky. It was Chinese class in the afternoon. Fang Yan walked towards the classroom with a teacup in his hand. When he walked to the door of the classroom, Fang Yan found a strange phenomenon. There were several female students around Tangcheng. They were laughing and talking to Tangcheng. They looked very happy. Qin Etienne, on the other hand, was sprawled lazily on the table with her headphones plugged into her ears. None of the guys walked over to disturb her. Wasn't she the goddess Rosefinch? Why wasn't there even a boy hitting on her? However, Fang Yan quickly figured out what was going on. It wasn't that the boys didn't want to go up and talk to her, but they didn't dare to. Tangxing was the most handsome guy in the school, but he still gave off an approachable vibe. Those girls were all willing and courageous to interact with him. Qin Etienne was the campus belle, but her temperament was fierce and flamboyant. The boys liked her, but they felt that they were not good enough for her. There was a type of woman who was born 1,000 miles away from others. This was also the reason why Huang Haoran regretfully said that she was too beautiful when Fang Yan asked Qin Etienne what shortcomings she had. Being too beautiful was a form of rejection in itself. As Fang Yan walked up to the podium, the bell rang. Zheng Guodong shouted lazily, "Stand up." "Hello, teacher." The students answered enthusiastically. After getting along for a period of time, Fang Yan had established a very close relationship with the students. Fang Yan glanced in the direction of Zheng Guodong and said with a smile, "Before class, I'd like to announce an appointment. Student Huang Haoran has always been our temporary Chinese class representative. Now I propose to make him a permanent representative. Does anyone have any objections?" Huang Haoran was knowledgeable and talented in the field of Chinese. Moreover, he was usually serious and responsible in his work. Everyone thought that he was the most suitable Chinese class representative in the class. "No objections," everyone said in unison. Fang Yan smiled and said, "Then it's settled." Huang Haoran sat in his seat and his face was flushed with excitement. He didn't care about the position of the Chinese class representative. He was excited to get the affirmation from Fang Yan. He loved Chinese and sinology, and he had always been proud of it. When Fang Yan came, he broke his spirit and let him know that he was still a frog at the bottom of a well. Fang Yan was the real strong one. To be able to receive the affirmation of one's respected was something that nothing could replace. After 2 classes, when Fang Yan was ready to go back to rest for a while, the phone in his pocket vibrated. He took out his phone and found a phone number that looked familiar yet strange. The familiar part was that he felt that this number must have called him before. The strange part was that he couldn't remember who had called. Fang Yan answered the phone and asked, "Who is this?" "Mr. Fang, this is Xiaomeng. Principal Lu asked you to go to her office." A girl's clear voice came from the phone. "Okay. I'll go now," Fang Yan said. "Did Principal Lu say anything?" "Mr. Fang, I don't know about this." I was just ordered to call you to tell you to come. Xiaoming giggled. They had chatted at the door of the office last time, so they were considered acquaintances. Therefore, the two of them talked more casually. See you in a while, Fang Yan said. After hanging up the phone, Fang Yan didn't go back to his office. Instead, he went directly to the administrative building where Lu Chaoga's office was located. At the door of Lu Chaoga's office, he was greeted by the secretary, Xiaoming. Fang Yan didn't see Zheng Jing all the way. He thought that maybe there was some misunderstanding between him and Lu Chaoga. The deputy director of the office who specialized in serving Lu Chaoga couldn't get the trust of Lu Chaoga. Zheng Jing's position was quite dangerous. Mr. Fang, you are here. Xiaoming smiled and greeted Fang Yan. Is Principal Lu here? Fang Yan asked. Yes. You can go straight in. Xiaoming said. Has anyone ever said that you are very cute? Fang Yan looked at Xiaoming and asked. Again. Xiaoming pouted and said. Last time, Fang Yan also asked her this question. She said yes, and then Fang Yan said that since others have said it, then he wouldn't say it anymore. He turned around and ran away. This made Xiaoming very angry. But you are really cute. Fang Yan said. Xiaoming immediately smiled and said, it would be strange to believe your words. After a few jokes, Fang Yan and Xiaoming waved their hands, pushed the door and walked into Lu Chaoga's office. There was music in Lu Chaoga's office, a very soothing lyrical song. Used to practicing that song in the palm of your hand, used to having your fingertips gently follow, and you are no longer in the song, you are still living in the memory. The more I want to forget, the more I will remember how happy I am with you. Lu Chaoga stood in front of the window sill trimming the potted plants. Every time she greeted Fang Yan with this posture. Fang Yan thought that her daily life must be very poor, and she could only arrange potted plants to relax her brain and kill time. Hearing the sound of the door opening behind her, Lu Chaoga put down the scissors in her hand and said, How are the flowers in the room? Did you ask me to come here just to ask about the flowers and plants? Fang Yan smiled bitterly. This woman was really infatuated with flowers. At least she should ask how people were doing first, right? Lu Chaoga naturally asked Fang Yan to come over for other things. She washed her hands in the bathroom, wiped them with a handkerchief, and came out and said, Sit down. Fang Yan did not sit down. He drank the water in the cup, asked Lu Chaoga for some tea, and then ran to the water dispenser to get a cup of boiled water to make tea. After he was done, Fang Yan sat in front of Lu Chaoga and said, Principal Lu, what can I do for you? Lu Chaoga looked at Fang Yan and said, In 2 days, students from Wuren Senior High School will come to Rosefinch Secondary for an exchange visit. Wuren Senior High School is one of the best private senior high schools in Japan, and it is also a fellowship school for Rosefinch Secondary. Every year, the two schools will send exchange students to study in each other's schools, and they will also randomly select a class for a group inspection. Fang Yan looked at Lu Chaoga with a puzzled expression and said, Although I have always remembered the words "don't forget the national humiliation" in my heart, and I don't have a good impression of these Japanese people, if they want to come, then let them come. Can I stop them? Lu Chaoga knew that Fang Yan did not understand what she meant, so she could only speak more bluntly and said, This is the situation that the school has just reported. The school hopes that during the inspection period of Wuren Senior High School, the school can be calm and stable, and show the best side of our school. Fang Yan finally understood, and his anger suddenly rose. He asked, What do you mean by this? Because of me, the school can't be calm and stable? This is the school's board of directors' decision, Lu Chaoga said. She also felt that some people in the school were making a mountain out of a molehill, and deliberately made Fang Yan a target. However, many people held this view, and even Principal Zhang Xiaofeng hoped that Fang Yan could keep a low profile during this period. Therefore, only Lu Chaoga could do the ideological work for Fang Yan. Principal Lu, of course I know that this is the chairman's decision. We have such a good relationship, and you definitely won't harm me like this, Fang Yan said helplessly. But, didn't you say that? I am your person, and you have to protect me, right? Yes. Lu Chaoga nodded. So, during the inspection period, you should try to keep a low profile. Lu Chaoga looked at Fang Yan and said, do you have anything else to say? No, Fang Yan said. Then go back, Lu Chaoga said. Take care of those flowers. Fang Yan got up and prepared to go out. When he walked to the door, Fang Yan stopped again. He walked back to Lu Chaoga and sat down in front of Lu Chaoga. He looked at Lu Chaoga with burning eyes and asked, do you know Zhu Jian? Lu Chaoga's delicate eyebrows furrowed slightly. Why do you ask? I'm just a little curious, Fang Yan said. Do you know him, Principal Lu? Yes, Lu Chaoga answered frankly. I was the one who handled his resignation procedures. Do you believe it? Fang Yan asked. Do you believe that he would do that kind of thing? Lu Chaoga looked at Fang Yan's face, but did not answer his question. I know. Fang Yan sighed softly. What was the point of knowing the answer to some things? Fang Yan picked up his cup and walked toward the door again. I can't protect everyone, Lu Chaoga said aloud. So, I hope everyone can be obedient. Fang Yan's footsteps paused, but he did not turn around and leave. Listening to the sound of Fang Yan's footsteps getting further away, Lu Chaoga's face also became gloomy. Chapter 68. This was the first disagreement between Fang Yan and Lu Chaoga. When Fang Yan first arrived, he met a leader like Lu Chaoga. Although Vermilion Bird Middle School was carrying out educational reform, from the leaders down to the teachers, they were all stubborn and unwilling to accept anything from outside. Lu Chaoga wanted to break the stalemate, but she couldn't find a suitable breakthrough point. The arrival of Fang Yan and the series of things he did gave Lu Chaoga an opportunity. The two of them didn't communicate, but they maintained a tacit understanding. One of them fought in the front, and the other provided ammunition and logistical support. They cooperated well, and it could even be said that they were telepathic. Fang Yan was respectful and casual to Lu Chaoga, and Lu Chaoga admired Fang Yan, but she couldn't do anything about it. Lu Chaoga knew about Zhu Jian, and she also suspected that there was more to it than meets the eye. However, in the face of conclusive evidence, she chose to compromise and remain silent. Fang Yan could understand why Lu Chaoga made such a decision. It was just like when he was blackmailed by the media and Li Ziqiang and others to expel him from the school, she chose to give in. She had her own position, and her first priority was to ensure her own safety. It could be forgiven, but there would always be some grudges in her heart. Lu Chaoga knew about this before, but she didn't help Zhu Jian. So, Fang Yan's plan to start with Lu Chaoga had to be changed. Without Lu Chaoga's help, it would be much more difficult to get justice for Zhu Jian. Fang Yan thought as he walked to the teacher's living area with a cup of tea. He had now settled in Lu Chaoga's courtyard. Although the food in the school cafeteria wasn't as rich as Jiang Qin's, he still saved a few yuan on the bus fare, right? A penny stumped a hero, not to mention Fang Yan, who was beaten up by Yi Rou and ran away. Crack, not far away, there was the sound of twigs breaking. Fang Yan raised his head and saw a student climbing up a large tree near the Sparrow River. Willow trees were planted along the banks of the Sparrow River. Their long branches cast shadows on the river, giving off a gentle and charming vibe. This was also why when Fang Yan led his students to the riverside to learn the poem, Farewell to Cambridge Again, they could recite sentences like, "The golden willows by the riverside are the bride in the setting sun," to the willows. However, a large area of green belts and both sides of the forest paths were planted with large-leaf parasol trees. These wudong trees all had a history of more than 10 years. Some of the older ones were even dozens of years or even hundreds of years old. These parasol trees were tall and big, with lush branches and leaves. If one did not pay close attention, even if there was a person hiding on it, it would not be easy to discover. Fang Yan was deep in thought when he heard the voice. "Who's in the tree? Come down quickly." Danger! Fang Yen shouted. As he spoke, he quickly ran towards the foot of the big banyan tree. With such a tall tree, if one were to fall accidentally, it was very likely that one's tendons and bones would be broken. Fang Yen was a teacher at the school. When encountering such a thing, he could not stay out of it and pretend that he did not see it. Moreover, if something really happened to a student, as a witness, the school might hold him responsible. Qinitian's hands grabbed onto a thick tree trunk. One of her feet was in the hole of the tree, and the other was on the tree trunk, preparing to climb up. It was a simple thing to think of, but it was very difficult to do. However, she was not a person who would give up easily. Since she had decided, she must do it well. Hearing someone shouting from below, she looked through the gaps between the leaves and saw that it was Fang Yen running towards her. She could not help but be happy and said, "Fang Yen, why is it you?" "Qinitian." As soon as Fang Yen heard the voice, he knew that it was Qinitian. This woman's voice was very special. It had the crispness of a young person, but it also had the magnetism of a mature woman. It was very recognizable. Moreover, among the students at Rosefinch Secondary, the only one who dared to call him by his name was Qinitian. Of course, Zheng Guodong and the others all called him idiot. Fang Yen stood under the parasol tree and looked up at Qinitian, who was on top of the tree trunk. At this time, the sun was setting in the west, and the sky was filled with red clouds that shone on the surface of the Sparrow River. Even the river water was sparkling, like a huge moving piece of silk. Rays of red light shone through the branches and leaves, shining on Qinitian's delicate and flawless face. Her face was light pink, and there was a kind of purity that could move one's heart. Even the tiny beads of sweat on her face had turned into colorful pearls that slid down her cheeks. It was so dazzling that one could not open their eyes. "Qinitian." Fang Yen gritted his teeth and shouted. "Why are you running up the tree? Come down quickly. What if you fall down?" Qinitian did not take Fang Yan's threat to heart at all. She used all her strength to climb up and giggled, saying, "If I fall down, you can catch me." "Why should I catch you?" Fang Yen said angrily. "Come down yourself. Don't blame me for not reminding you." "Because I'm your student," Qinitian said. "And also your admirer." "Qinitian, I'm not joking with you." "Fang Yen, I'm not joking with you either." "You." Fang Yen really did not know what to do with this woman. He was secretly on guard, ready to catch her if she really fell down accidentally. There are so many fun places in school. Why are you climbing up the tree? Trees are fun too. Qinitian took another step forward and finally stood on the largest horizontal branch at the top of the tree. She stood there and looked down at the Sparrow River. The red sunlight gilded her body with a rich layer of gold. She squinted her eyes and smiled, saying, "Fang Yen, the Sparrow River on the tree is even more enchanting." "Hurry up and come down after you're done," Fang Yen said angrily. Of course he knew that the scenery would be different when looking down from a high vantage point. But, if everyone climbed up the tree to look at the scenery like you, wouldn't the school be in chaos? "I still have work to do," Qinitian said. "Work?" Fang Yen was confused. What kind of work could there be in a tree? Qinitian held onto the tree trunk with one hand while her other hand reached into her bag to search for something. She actually took out a little bird. The little bird's wings were not fully developed. It looked like it had just been born and could not fly freely. The little bird chirped and seemed to be very scared and anxious. Only then did Fang Yen notice that there was a bird's nest on top of Qinitian's head. A big bird was standing next to the nest and chirping, looking very anxious and angry. Even though a person as big as Qinitian was standing next to it and threatening its territory, the big bird still had no intention of running away. It stretched out its beak and spread its wings, looking like it was going to fight Qinitian to the death at any time. "Don't be afraid," Qinitian said to the big bird. "I know you're very anxious. I'll bring the baby back to you." As Qinitian spoke, she raised one hand and slowly placed the little bird into the nest. Chirp, 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 the little bird landed in the nest and chirped happily. The big bird chirped and circled around the little bird. She retracted her wings and stopped attacking Chinitian. Chinitian waved at the little bird and the mother bird and said, "Be careful next time. Goodbye." Chirp, 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 she didn't know what the little bird and the mother bird were chirping. It looked like they were expressing their gratitude to Chinitian, but it also seemed like they were reluctant to part with her. Seeing this scene, Fang Yan's originally angry mood suddenly calmed down. Chinitian, the girl who was fierce and smart in his eyes, turned out to have such a delicate and kind side. It seemed that he couldn't look at people with colored glasses in the future. A good person has a bad side, and a bad person might also be a filial son. How could 1,000 people have 1,000 faces? Just as Fang Yan reflected on his mistakes in his heart and corrected his previous attitude towards Chinitian, Chinitian stood on the tree trunk and shouted, "Fang Yan, call Mr. Fang. If other students here." "Fang Yan, I want to jump from the tree," Chinitian said. Fang Yan turned around and said, "Whatever, I can't see." Before Fang Yan finished saying, "Out of sight, out of mind," he turned around and rushed forward. Fang Yan held Chinitian's body in his arms and looked at her smiling face fiercely. "Chinitian." Fang Yan had an impulse to go crazy. "What do you want to do? I knew you would catch me." Chinitian lay in Fang Yan's arms and said with a serious face, "What if I can't catch you?" "You will catch it." She had no doubt about that. "If, Fang Yan, you will catch me, right?" Chinitian looked at Fang Yan's eyes. "You won't let me get hurt, right? What does it have to do with me if you get hurt?" Fang Yan was so angry that he almost cursed. He threw Chinitian on the ground and said, "If you do this kind of stupid thing again, you will still catch me. Don't let me see you." "I won't do it when you can't see me." Seeing Fang Yan's angry look, Chinitian felt it was interesting. She tidied up her long hair and wrapped the bird poop in the bag with a tissue in her hand. "Fang Yan, the books say that men like silly women. Did I look silly just now?" "Silly," Fang Yan answered without hesitation. He would be angry with anyone who dared to say that Chinitian was not silly. Such a tall tree, she didn't say a word. No, she dared to jump down when others didn't believe her. What if something happened? What if she broke her leg? What if her face was scratched? Such a beautiful girl, if something happened to her. Of course, if she really fell into 5 pieces, there was no way she could survive. Silly and cute. Silly and hateful. Chapter 69. As soon as Fang Yan pushed open the courtyard door, Chinitian walked past him. She looked at the courtyard curiously and said, "No way. The teachers of Rosefinch Secondary have such good benefits. They can live in such a beautiful house." She ran toward the potted flowers in the courtyard and exclaimed, "Did you plant all these flowers? They're so beautifully trimmed. But I don't think you planted them because you just came to this school." Fang Yan stood at the door and looked at her helplessly, saying, "Chinitian, it's school time now. Won't your parents worry if you don't go home?" Chinitian turned around and smiled, saying, "Don't worry. Even if I don't go back for a year and a half, my parents won't worry." "Then you really don't make your parents like you," Fang Yan said. Seeing her arrogant look, he wanted to give her a blow. Chinitian looked at Fang Yan with a smile, knowing his mind like the back of her hand. She waved her hand and said, "Come in. Please." Fang Yan closed the courtyard door and walked in. "I'm the owner of this courtyard. How come it's your turn to greet me?" "You're also not the owner of this courtyard." Chinitian raised her face and thought for a moment, then said, "Headmaster Lu Chaoga's house, right?" Fang Yan looked at her in surprise and said, "Why do you think so?" "First, you have a close relationship with Headmaster Lu Chaoga. This is not a secret in the school. Secondly, not every teacher could be allocated a courtyard like this. On the way here, I counted that there are only 11 such small courtyards. This number can only be provided for the school's leaders, and it's impossible for all the teachers to have one. On the other hand, there were high-rise apartments in the West District. Those were the houses for the other teachers to live in. Combining these 2 points, the answer was obvious. Principal Lu Chaoga doesn't live in the school, so she gave her courtyard to Fang Yan, whom she trusts. Fang Yan, should I regard Principal Lu Chaoga as my opponent? Qi Nitian thought about it seriously and said, it should be interesting to compete with the vice principal for the same man, right? Qi Nitian. Fang Yan grabbed Qi Nitian's shoulders with both hands, and his eyes were about to spit fire. Once again, I'm telling you solemnly that it's impossible between us. I'm the teacher, and you're the student. That's all we have, and that's all we'll ever have. From today onwards, from this second onwards, don't challenge my bottom line and speak nonsense. Are those irrelevant words referring to the fact that I like you? Qi Nitian asked. If that's the case. Qi Nitian pointed to his chest and said, I never deceive myself, let alone you. Qi Nitian, what do you like about me? Can I change it? If someone else said this, I would think it's very vulgar and boring. Qi Nitian pursed his lips and smiled. But if it's you who said it. You look so cute when you say it. Qi Nitian took Fang Yan's hands off his shoulders, walked into the room, looked around, and said, simple and elegant, it's Lu Chaoga's style. Are you familiar with her? No, Qi Nitian said. I just met her twice on the road. You can tell what kind of style she is from the way she dresses. Qi Nitian, we really should have a good talk. Fang Yan followed into the room and sat on the sofa in the living room. He pointed to the sofa opposite and said, sit down. Qi Nitian sat opposite Fang Yan and said, if you want to talk to me about respecting you, loving you, and keeping a distance from you, then our negotiation will not have any substantive results. I can give you the answer now, but I don't want to. Qi Nitian, I'm a teacher, and you're a student. Fang Yan looked serious and tried to persuade him, think about it, if others know our relationship, what will they think? I don't care. I care. Fang Yan's voice rose a little. I'm a teacher, and I have to cherish my reputation. In my eyes, you're just a child. Fang Yan, how old are you? When Wu Qilong debuted, Lu Shishir was still in kindergarten. They're stars. They're different from us. It's not that we can't be together. Qi Nitian analyzed calmly. It just takes a little time to wait. I'm 17 this year, and I'll be an adult next year. After 2 years, I'll go to college. If I want, it'll only take 1 year. When I'm in college, will there be any obstacles for us to be together? Qi Nitian, are you lying to me? Fang Yan looked at the girl's beautiful face and asked. What? I don't understand why you like me. Fang Yan said straightforwardly. To be honest, a girl like you likes hundreds and thousands of boys. It should be more than that. Qi Nitian added. If that's the case, why do you take the initiative to like me? Because you're excellent. Qi Nitian said matter-of-factly. You don't know how excellent you are, do you? Fang Yan thought about it seriously and said, to be honest, I've never thought about this. Am I excellent? Very excellent. Qi Nitian nodded affirmatively. Fang Yan smiled shyly and said, it seems that I still lack understanding of myself. Yes, Qi Nitian said. Any girl, if they have foresight like me, will fall in love with you. Then let's set 3 rules, Fang Yan said. Which 3 rules? First, don't confess to me in public. Continue. Second, call me Teacher Fang Yan in front of my classmates. I'll allow you to call me Fang Yan in private. What else? Don't get too close to me. It's best if we maintain a certain degree of conflict on the surface. That's it? That's it. Qi Nitian smiled and said, Fang Yan, I won't agree to any of these 3 rules. Fang Yan was hurt. He felt that he had wasted half a day talking. Fang Yan, do you know why I'm sure you'll catch me? I don't know. I'm also sure of one thing. You'll definitely like me. Qin Dahai stood on the podium and glanced at the students in a dignified manner. He said, I'm satisfied with everyone's recent performance. But some students. You must pay attention. Huang Haoran, did you talk to your classmates in class? Teacher, I didn't. Huang Haoran's face turned red as he stood up and said. Being criticized by the teacher in front of everyone made this student, who had an extremely high self-esteem, feel very uncomfortable. No? Then did my eyes deceive me? Qin Dahai shouted angrily. In the second history class this morning, I saw you talking to your desk-mate in a low voice. You dare to deny it? Teacher Duan, let us discuss freely. Excuses. Qin Dahai didn't believe Huang Haoran's words at all, and he didn't want to believe it. I tried to entice you, but you refused. You even ran to the school leaders to complain about me. Do you think you're so great because you have Fang Yan to protect you? If he can make you the temporary representative of the Chinese class, I can wipe you off the list as well. Pay attention in the future. If I find you talking in class again, I'll deduct your conduct points. Huang Haoran was full of grievances, but he couldn't refute it. Because he did talk in class. Even if this lawsuit went to the sky, Qin Dahai was still in the right. Qin Dahai was very satisfied with his performance of killing the chicken to warn the monkey. He said, when the school just started, we weren't familiar with each other. I only temporarily appointed the class leader and the class representative for each class. Now, everyone has been together for a long time, and we have a preliminary understanding of each other. So, I'm going to use the time of one class to choose a trustworthy student cadre. Qin Dahai's eyes paused on Jing Guodong for a moment, and said, of course, the previously appointed students have selflessly served all of us for a long time. If we rashly choose a newcomer, it'll be unfair to the previous students. So, I think we'll make it simple. It'll still be the previous students. If everyone thinks their work is okay, and everyone is satisfied with them, then they'll stay. If everyone isn't satisfied with this student's work, then we'll choose a new student to replace them. Qin Dahai had his own selfish reasons for doing this. He knew what kind of person Jing Guodong was, and he also knew that the students in the class didn't like Jing Guodong. If they voted, it would be difficult for Jing Guodong to stay. However, if he easily removed Jing Guodong's position as the class representative, Jing Guodong wouldn't be satisfied, and it wouldn't look good for Jing Tiancheng's school director's face either. It would be extremely advantageous for Jing Guodong if he implemented a custom-made arrangement. Jing Guodong was the only candidate for the class representative. If the majority of people weren't satisfied, then they would vote to choose a new class representative. With Jing Guodong's power in the class, there probably wouldn't be many people who dared to stand up and oppose Jing Guodong to stay as the class representative. Qin Dahai smiled and said, okay. Then let's first vote on the class representative. Students who agree that Jing Guodong should continue to be the class representative, raise your hands. Except for Li Yang and Chen Tao who were beside Jing Guodong, everyone else lowered their heads in silence. Jing Guodong's face was ugly, and his heart was filled with anger. He thought to himself, I have to find a chance to deal with you guys who don't listen. Qin Dahai's face was also ugly, and at the same time, he realized that he had said the wrong thing. He smiled dryly and said, maybe the students haven't thought about it clearly. I'll give everyone another chance to choose. Students who don't agree that Jing Guodong should be the class representative, raise your hands. This time, no one raised their hands. Qin Dahai was happy and said, if no one objects, then Jing Guodong will continue to be the class representative of our class, and continue to serve the students. Qin Etian left the table and walked to the podium. He glanced at the whole class and said, students who agree that Qin Etian should be the class representative, raise your hands. Hua, countless arms were raised. God said let there be light, so there was light in the world. Qinitian said I want to be the class representative, so she became the class representative. Chapter 70. There was no emotional canvassing for votes, no campaign speech. Qinitian wanted the class monitor, so she became the class monitor. The muscles on Chen Dahai's face kept twitching as he watched the audience raise their hands in unison. When he saw his sons Chen Tao and Li Yang in the back row also raise their hands in agreement, his heart felt like it was trampled by 10 million wild horses. These two idiots, why did you raise your hands? The only student who didn't raise his hand was Zheng Guodong. Zheng Guodong knew that he was not popular in the class, and everyone didn't like him. However, they didn't like him, and they were afraid of him. According to Chen Dahai's proposal, as long as no one stood up to oppose in public, then the position of the class monitor could only be him. Whether they were willing or not, they couldn't change this fact. Just as he was thinking about this, Qinitian rushed to the podium. Then there was no future he wanted. Zheng Guodong saw Li Yang and Chen Tao sitting next to him also raised their hands. He didn't care that it was in class, so he slapped Li Yang's head and scolded, "Asshole, who told you to raise your hand?" Li Yang saw Zheng Guodong's angry expression, and his body trembled. He quickly withdrew his arm and apologized, "Boss, I accidentally raised my hand wrong." Chen Tao saw Li Yang was beaten, and quickly put his arm down. He explained, "I saw them all raise their hands, so I was excited and raised them, idiot." Zheng Guodong scolded, gnashing his teeth. At this point, it was impossible for Chen Dahai to force Zheng Guodong to stay. He glanced at Qinitian, who was standing next to him, and felt that he was taller than him. He couldn't do anything about this campus celebrity, and said, "Qinitian took the initiative to run for the position of the class monitor, which is praiseworthy. Are there any other students who want to run for the position of the class monitor?" No one answered. Everyone looked at Qinitian with burning eyes. They did not want to compete with Qinitian. Qinitian wanted to be the class monitor, so they were willing to let her be the class monitor. What was a princess? What is a queen? That's what it is. No matter how strong her aura was, no matter how beautiful she was, everyone still loved her, cherished her, and gave her all their energy. Chen Dahai laughed dryly a few times and said, "It seems that Qinitian classmate has won everyone's expectations. Then, Qinitian will be the class monitor. I hope that Qinitian will be diligent in the future. While serving the class well, you will also play a role model. I'm not running for the position because I think I'm the most suitable candidate." Qinitian's words were meant for Chen Dahai and the whole class to hear. "I just think I'm better than Zheng Guodong." Zheng Guodong's chest was stabbed again. "I can't be diligent, and I can't be a role model. Even if I become the class monitor, I may still skip class and sleep, and not hand in my homework. You may even suddenly find that I disappear for a few days, and there will be no change from before. Qinitian, we are willing to elect you as the class monitor. Yes, the last time we learned Rainy Alley, you wore high heels and walked over and over again. Qinitian, we all know what kind of person you are. Do whatever you want to do, don't feel pressured." Qinitian smiled and said, "I want to make things clear in advance, lest you feel disappointed in the future. Some responsibilities, I may not bear. But if you need me for something, I will not refuse." "That's it," everyone said. Qinitian nodded and said, "Then, from today on, I am the class monitor of Class 9. Clatter, warm applause resounded in the classroom. Chen Dahai had a smile on his face, but he was very angry in his heart. What was there to applaud for? With Qinitian standing up to take the lead, the next deputy class monitor position was taken by Tangcheng. He ran for deputy class monitor because he wanted to follow in Qinitian's footsteps. He hoped that the two of them would not only study but also have more contact in work. However, the class representatives for each subject were still the original ones. When Chen Dahai appointed the representatives for each subject, it was based on the results of each subject. For example, Huang Haoran's Chinese was the first in Class 9, so he was the Chinese class representative. Su Ying's mathematics was the first in the class, so she was the mathematics class representative. Chen Dahai originally wanted to remove Huang Haoren's Chinese class representative, but in the end, more than 2/3 of the students supported Huang Haoren to continue to be the Chinese class representative. He wanted to, but he was powerless. For Chen Dahai, this was the biggest failure of the class committee appointment. Because all the positions did not go according to his plan. He lost control of the class. He was very clear about this. After all the class committee appointments, Chen Dahai said a few words of congratulations and encouragement. Because he was in a bad mood, there was still more than 10 minutes left in this class, so he was too lazy to lecture. He assigned some extracurricular exercises to everyone, then walked to Zheng Guodong, who was in a daze in the back row, knocked on his table, and said, "Classmate Zheng Guodong, come out with me." Outside the classroom, Chen Dahai and Zheng Guodong were speechless. After a long time, Chen Dahai broke the deadlock and said, "I didn't expect Qin Etienne to get involved. This girl's influence is too great." "I understand," Zheng Guodong said aloud. "I know what kind of person Qin Etienne is. If she wants to, no one can stop her. I just think it's strange," Chen Dahai said. "Qin Etienne is not interested in this kind of thing. I heard from Teacher Bai that they wanted Qin Etienne to be the class monitor of the first class, but Qin Etienne refused in every way. Why is she suddenly so enthusiastic about this kind of thing now that she's in the 9th class?" Zheng Guodong's expression was resentful as he said, "I thought about it just now. There's only one possibility." "What's the reason?" "For Fang Yan," Zheng Guodong said. Chen Dahai's eyes turned cold as he said, "What do you mean?" "On the first day she came, she confessed to Fang Yan in front of everyone." When Zheng Guodong said this, his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Qin Etienne was the goddess in the eyes of all the boys in the school, and also the woman he liked. He used his identity as the son of the school director to try to get close to her, but Qin Etienne didn't look at him at all. His feelings for Qin Etienne were very complicated. He liked her very much, but he also hated her very much. But how could she confess to Fang Yan? "Is this true? Why didn't you tell me before?" Chen Dahai's eyes widened. If the news was true, he knew it meant a disaster for Fang Yan. "It's true." Zheng Guodong glanced at Chen Dahai's expression and said. They were all familiar with each other, so there was no need to hide it. "It's just that Qin Etienne is bold." Everyone thought she was joking with Fang Yan. So no one took it seriously. "Stupid," Chen Dahai scolded. After scolding, he remembered the unusual identity of the student in front of him, so he smiled flatteringly and said, "Guodong, the information you provided is very important. It may be of great use to us." "Great use?" Zheng Guodong said. "What if they say it's a joke?" Chen Dahai scanned around vaguely and said fiercely, "What if we burn a fire in the back and make it real?" It wasn't until Tang Cheng stood up and shouted, "Stand up," that the entire class stood up and shouted, "Good morning, teacher," that Fang Yan knew that there was a new class committee appointment. The appointment was out of his expectations. The class monitor was actually Qin Etienne. He was furious. This girl listened to music and slept in class. After class, she went to the Sparrow River to take a walk and dig out bird nests. She never brought textbooks into the classroom, not even a pen. She would only borrow a pen and paper from her desk mate, Ho Xiaolong, when there was homework that she was interested in. She would pretend not to hear anything when she was not interested in homework. How did she become the class monitor? However, Huang Haoren was still the language class representative. Fang Yan was still very satisfied with this. Huang Haoren was a student he valued, and she was very cooperative and supportive in the later work. He could ignore other people, but he still had to be satisfied with his own class representative. Qin Etienne's seat was empty. Obviously, she was probably lying by the Sparrow River, sunbathing or doing what she liked in some beautiful place. This school didn't have any control over her. It was fine if the school didn't care, but why didn't her family care either? Fang Yan thought he should visit Qin Tian's home and have a good talk with her parents. Children shouldn't be spoiled too much. Let's go to class, Fang Yan said. When Fang Yan was telling the students about the article, he heard footsteps coming from outside the classroom. The footsteps weren't heavy, but when a group of people walked in the same rhythm, all the sounds gathered together and resonated, making the sound seem deep and loud. Fang Yan turned around and saw a group of students wearing clothes completely different from Rosefinch Secondary standing outside the classroom looking in through the window. Fang Yan understood that the delegation from Wuren High School had arrived. The school didn't even inform him to welcome them. Lu Chaoge was also standing in the middle of the group of adults in the back row. When she met Fang Yan's eyes, she nodded so softly that it was almost inaudible. A middle-aged woman in a gray uniform stood beside Lu Chaoge. She looked at Fang Yan, who was standing on the podium, and said, "Principal Lu, is the young man standing on the podium a student or a teacher?" "He's a teacher from Rosefinch Secondary," Lu Chaoge answered honestly. She had a bad feeling in her heart. As expected, Matsushima Ki's next sentence made her want to go crazy. "He's really young. I'm very curious about how talented such a young teacher is. Principal Lu, can my student and I enter the classroom to listen in?" If it was possible, Lu Chaoge really wanted to say no to them. Lu Chaoge was very annoyed. She felt that this request from the Wuren delegation was very unkind. Chapter 71. Principal Lu, is it difficult? Matsushima Ki asked again when he saw that Lu Chaoge did not agree. She spoke in English, which was not difficult at all for Lu Chaoge, who had studied in the United States. It was not difficult, but it was very difficult. Before the Wuren Business Mission Group came, the school was worried that Fang Yan would do something that would affect the school's reputation again. So, the board of directors and the management specially entrusted Lu Chaoge and Fang Yan to discuss how to appease comrade Fang Yan. Now, Fang Yan kept quiet, but the Wuren Business Mission Group took the initiative to come to them. Lu Chaoge knew that if she agreed to Matsushima Ki's request, then things would develop in an uncontrollable direction. Even if she was the vice principal of Rosefinch Secondary and thought that she had a good relationship with Fang Yan. If Fang Yan was determined to do something, then she could not stop him. She could not say no, because the more she refused, the more curious Matsushima Ki and the students would be. Moreover, the two schools were friendly. When the teachers of Rosefinch Secondary led a team to Wuren, Wuren did their best and did not hide anything. If Rosefinch Secondary hid anything, it would affect the relationship between the two schools. They would ask, "What are you afraid of?" "No problem." Lu Chaoge smiled and agreed. "Of course, I need to communicate with Mr. Fang Yan." Matsushima Ki smiled and said, "That's what I should do." She said to the teachers and students who came with the group in Japanese, "Dear teachers and students, I propose to audit a language class. Do you have any objections?" "No." The students of Wuren High School answered with a smile. Their voices were very uniform and soft. They would not disturb the students of Class 9 and the surrounding classes. Lu Chaoge stood at the door of the classroom and said, "Mr. Fang Yan, I have something to discuss with you." Fang Yan walked to Lu Chaoge and said, "Principal Lu, what's the matter?" "The people behind me are the teachers and students of Wuren High School. They are very interested in you and want to listen to your class," Lu Chaoge said. "Are you interested in me?" Fang Yan laughed. "Principal Lu must be very worried, right?" Fang Yan. Lu Chaoge was exasperated. "I listened to you guys and stayed quiet. I didn't do anything." Fang Yan was ordered to stay quiet by the school, so he was holding back his anger. Now that he had the opportunity, he naturally wouldn't give up so easily. Although his sarcasm would only make Lu Chaoge and the others feel a little uncomfortable, but thinking of their discomfort, Fang Yan felt much better. After all, Lu Chaoge represented Rosefinch Secondary before and now. Now they're taking the initiative to look for trouble. They're not looking for trouble, they're just listening. Lu Chaoga ignored Fang Yan's poisonous tongue and said aloud. I understand. Fang Yan nodded. But if something happens, I won't be responsible. What will happen? I'm so handsome, what if their teachers or students confess to me? You're thinking too much. Lu Chaoga didn't want to talk to Fang Yan anymore. Matsushima Ki and the others were still waiting for them. Although Matsushima Ki didn't speak the Hua-Xia language well, there were many translators in the delegation who were proficient in the Hua-Xia language. Because of the long-term exchange between the two schools, some students were also very familiar with the Hua-Xia language. If they heard the conversation between the two, it would be such a shameful thing. It's decided. Make the arrangements. Lu Chaoga turned around and walked to Matsushima Ki. She said, Mr. Fang Yan said that he welcomes the delegation from Wuren to come and listen. Thank you. Matsushima Ki said. She then walked in front of Fang Yan and said in a non-standard Hua-Xia language, Thank you. Mr. Fang. You're a guest from afar. Fang Yan smiled. He made an inviting gesture and said, Please come in. There were 20 students in the delegation from Wuren. Including Matsushima Ki and the other 4 teachers, there were a total of 25 people. Since Matsushima Ki was the vice principal of Wuren Senior High School, according to the principle of reciprocity, the vice principal of Rosefinch Secondary, Lu Chaoga was in charge of all the reception work. There were more than 30 people in the classroom all of a sudden, so the tables and chairs were definitely not enough. Fang Yan thought about it and said, Male students, can you give up your chairs and let the ladies use them? There's no need. Matsushima Ki heard Fang Yan's words clearly and stopped him. He said, We're just here to listen. We can't disturb the students in class. We can just stand at the back. Fang Yan smiled and said, You have your ideas, and we have our ways. Hua-Xia is a country of etiquette that has been around for thousands of years. Hua-Xia men are also brave and generous gentlemen. How can we sit and let our guests from afar stand? The boys immediately responded. They pulled out their chairs and gave them to the ladies from the delegation from Wuren and Rosefinch Secondary. Matsushima Ki couldn't help but look at Fang Yan in a higher light. He thought to himself, regardless of whether this young teacher is talented or not, he's very good at dealing with people. Due to historical reasons, the citizens of Hua-Xia and Japan had always been conflicted. Fang Yan asked the students to give up their seats because they were guests from afar. In addition, he especially pointed out that all Chinese men were brave and generous gentlemen, and he put bravery in front of generosity. The subtext was that when we should beat you up, we will still beat you up, but when we pay attention to etiquette, we will not be looked down upon. These guests from Japan were very self-disciplined. The girls who got their seats automatically walked toward the aisles and lined up one by one. The boys who didn't have chairs stood side by the wall according to their height. They didn't say a word and had a proper attitude, as if they had undergone special training. After everyone settled down, Fang Yan continued his lecture. He said, There's a saying that goes, the beauty of knowledge lies in confusing people. The beauty of poetry lies in inciting men and women to have an affair. This is a joke, but it can also be a fact. Why is it said that poetry can incite men and women to have an affair? It's because it's subtle and obscure, and it makes people's hearts skip a beat. It can shock the spirit and soul, and it blends in with the vicissitudes of society. Fang Yan looked at the students in the audience and said with a smile, At your age, have you ever been moved by a love poem? Conquered by a poem? Have you ever thought of writing a love poem for the person you like? I don't need you to answer this question. I know there will be. The students in the audience laughed out loud. At their best age, meeting the most beautiful you, how could they be willing to be mediocre and refuse to confess? They fantasized about love, seeing it as the most important possession in life. They were willing to do all kinds of crazy things for their other half. Fighting with their love rivals in the bar, riding motorcycles on the road until late at night, sitting in the park on a winter night, not willing to part even if it was freezing, saving half a year's worth of pocket money just to buy the birthday gift that the other person liked, holding hands and walking through street after street without buying anything. They might find it a little stupid when they were adults, but now, when they thought of these things, they felt sweet to their bones. Youth was like poetry, and they used their youth to write poems. Since ancient times, our predecessors have left us a rich treasure trove of poems. Fang Yen scanned the audience and recited with a voice full of emotion, "Tearful eyes ask flowers, flowers do not speak, chaotic red flies over the swing. Tender like water, a good night is like a dream, enduring the road back to the Magpie Bridge. If love lasts for a long time, how can we stay together day and night? I live at the head of the Yangtze River, you live at the tail, thinking of you every day but not seeing you, drinking the water of the Yangtze River together. It's vivid, thousands of years later, as if there's still a beautiful scene before us." Fang Yen looked at the students in the audience with a smile and said, "What's your favorite poem? Or which one?" 10 years of life and death, not thinking, naturally unforgettable, a student answered. Searching for him in the crowd for thousands of times, suddenly looking back, that person is there, in the dimly lit place, another person answered. Flowers drift and water flow, a kind of lovesickness, two kinds of idle worries. Every student had the most beautiful poem in their heart, so everyone answered very enthusiastically. Qin Etian skipped class and was not around. More than 30 of the 40 students in class 9 answered this question. Matsushima Ki saw this and nodded to himself, thinking that the teacher's lecture was not boring and could stimulate the students to participate. This young teacher did a good job. Some of the students understood the Hua Xia language and could directly feel the beauty of the poems that Fang Yen spoke. There were also some students who did not speak the Hua Xia language well, so they could only rely on translators to help. Of course, although the translators knew how to translate the language, they were limited by their level of education or did not have a deep understanding of the poem, so the effect of translating into Japanese was naturally greatly reduced. When the class was about to end, Fang Yen allowed the students to ask questions freely. A middle-aged man with sparse hair stepped forward and spoke in fluent Hua Xia language. "Teacher, hello. I am Saburo Fujino, a national studies teacher at Wuren University. Just now, when I heard the beauty of your poems, my heart was greatly shaken. Hua Xia culture has a long history. Poems from the Tang and Song dynasties can be heard in any corner of the world. What I don't understand is, the Hua Xia people have so many years of culture and history and have produced so many outstanding sages. Why is there such a strange saying now? What is it?" Fang Yen asked with a smile. "The troublemaker is here?" With this thought in mind, he subconsciously glanced at Lu Chaoga, who was sitting in the back row. The culture of the Tang dynasty is in Japan, the culture of the Ming dynasty is in South Korea, and the culture of the Republic of China is in Taiwan, Saburo Fujino said with a smile as he adjusted his glasses. Why is there such a saying? Could it be that the people of Hua Xia are unwilling to inherit the excellent culture left behind by their ancestors? Chapter 72. There is a saying among the people, if you want to learn about the Tang culture, you can go to Japan. If you want to learn about the Song culture, you can go to Korea. If you want to learn about the Yuan culture, you can go to Mongolia. If you want to learn about the Ming culture, you can go to Myanmar. If you want to learn about the Qing culture, you can go to Hong Kong. If you want to learn about the Republic culture, you can go to Taiwan. The meaning is that the essence of the Tang culture was inherited by Japan, the essence of the Song culture was inherited by Korea, and the essence of the Republic culture was inherited by Taiwan. So, what did the people of Hua Xia inherit? When it comes to foreign cultures, we must take the essence and discard the dregs. However, when it comes to the cultural heritage of their own country, some people do the opposite, taking the dregs and discarding the essence. It is precisely because some people have forgotten their roots that the people of Hua Xia are often looked down upon and ridiculed by foreigners. Saburo Fujino is an expert in the field of Hua Xia culture. Naturally, he agreed with this saying. Thus, he raised this question to Fang Yen in front of everyone. He had the intention of making a fool out of Fang Yan. You are a teacher of language, or rather, national studies. Your poems are so beautiful and your knowledge is so rich. So, why is there such a saying? The essence of Huaxia culture can only be appreciated in other countries. Isn't this a great irony? I have also heard of this saying. Fang Yan said calmly. There are some things that are useless to deny. It will only show that the person is shallow and stupid. Since Mr. Fujino is a researcher in the field of Huaxia culture, you must have heard of this saying, wherever there is well water, there is Lu Ci. Yes, I know the origin of this saying. Saburo Fujino smiled and nodded. This is a description of a poet from Huaxia called Lu Sanbian. His works are widely spread. Wherever there is well water, you can hear Lu Ci being sung. I have to say, the ancient culture of Huaxia is indeed profound and makes people yearn for it. Saburo Fujino's words had a hidden meaning. He only said that the ancient culture of Huaxia is profound and makes people yearn for it. However, what kind of culture does the current Huaxia have that makes people yearn for it? Fang Yan naturally understood the deeper meaning behind his words. He smiled and continued, Mr. Fujino has heard of the saying, wherever there is water, there will be willows. Do you know that there is another saying behind this saying? Saburo Fujino knew that Fang Yan would refute his point of view, but Fang Yan did not make it clear. He could only shake his head and say, I don't know for the time being. Wherever there is human habitation, there is Huaxia civilization. The culture of the Tang dynasty was in Japan, while the culture of the Ming dynasty was in South Korea. This just happened to show that the Huaxia culture was well passed down, and the whole world was learning and recognizing it. The culture of Huaxia belongs to the country as well as the world. This is the pride of our Huaxia people. Is that so? Fujino did not expect Fang Yan to be so shameless as to misinterpret his argument. Secretly angry, he said, as far as I know, the understanding of this sentence is completely opposite to teacher Fang Yan's explanation. As a researcher and inheritor of culture, we should be modest and cautious, seeking truth from facts. Saburo Fujino swept his gaze across the room and said, Teacher Fang Yan, lying in front of your own students is not a good habit. You are a teacher. If you lie, your students will be negatively affected. It is not just me. All of us here know that the true meaning of that sentence is that it is regretful that the people of Huaxia are unable to protect and pass down their excellent culture. Yes, teacher Fang Yan's words earlier are very good. It belongs to the country as well as the world. We admire the culture of Huaxia. You people discard the dregs, but we are willing to preserve it perfectly. Passing it down from generation to generation, polishing our muscles and bones, enriching our knowledge and improving the quality of the entire nation. Saburo Fujino smiled as he looked at Fang Yan. At the same time, he looked at the many Rosefinch students present and said, There is an old man in Huaxia who once said, People today have their faults and do not like the rules of others. It is like concealing one's illness and avoiding treatment. It is better to destroy one's body than to realize it. Why concealing one's illness and avoiding treatment? Frankly admit one's shortcomings and correct them while they can still be saved. Starting from today, isn't this a better way to solve the problem? It is not that we are unwilling to admit it. It is just that we have no way to admit it, Fang Yan said with a smile. Mr. Fujino Saburo, you keep putting labels on us and telling us that what you say is the truth. However, is the situation really as Mr. Fujino Saburo said? I have doubts in my heart and so do my students. Why do people think that the essence of the Tang dynasty's culture was inherited by the Japanese and the essence of the Song dynasty's culture was inherited by South Korea? Fang Yan's expression was gentle and his voice was calm. There was a faint smile on his face as he said, Since Saburo Fujino is an expert in Huaxia, then you must have heard of such a fairy tale, right? In an abandoned well, there lived a frog. One day, the frog met a large turtle from the East China Sea by the well. The frog proudly boasted to the turtle, Look, I am living here comfortably. If I was in a good mood, would jump and play in the well, and when I was tired, I would rest in the cave on the wall of the well. Sometimes a comfortable dip in the water, sometimes a pleasant walk in the mud. Look at those little worms, crabs, and tadpoles. Which of them can compare to me? How free I am to occupy this abandoned well all by myself. Why don't you go down the well and have a look around? The sea turtle didn't take the frog's invitation seriously and said, "Have you ever seen the sea?" The vastness of the sea was more than 1,000 miles. The depth of the sea was more than 10,000 feet. The well could dry up, but the sea never had an end. I prefer to live in the sea, because that is the real world. You sit in the well all day, how can you know the vastness of the world? After Fang Yen finished his story, the classroom became lively. The students of Class 9 were naturally excited and overjoyed. When they heard Saburo Fujino attacking Huaxia's cultural heritage, they became unhappy. However, they could not stand out and object. This was because the Wu Ren delegation was a guest from afar. If they were too agitated, the school might punish them. However, Fang Yen was not afraid of the school's punishment. He also ignored the fact that the leaders of Rosefinch Secondary were right in front of him. He said what needed to be said and fought for what needed to be fought for. He wasn't cowardly, he didn't run away, he had a point of view, a story, and his words were sharp, making people feel comfortable. Who would be willing to be slapped in the face on their own turf? Mr. Fang is really flattering. Mr. Fang's story was well told, it was wonderful. That's right, how can a frog in a well know the vastness of the sea? Unlike the students, the leaders and teachers of Vermilion Bird High School looked a little unfriendly. Jia Sighting, the leader of the language team, whispered to the teacher beside him, "You don't know when to back off. How can you speak to a guest like that? I'm afraid things are going to get worse." That's right. If the guest gets angry and cancels the fellowship with Rosefinch Secondary, it will be a big loss of face. Principal Lu, you have to stand up and say something. Lu Chaoga sat beside Matsushima Ki, expressionless and silent. If the students of Rosefinch Secondary reacted with joy and the teachers of Rosefinch panicked, then the representatives of Wu Ren delegation reacted with anger. Those who were familiar with the culture of Huaxia or could understand the language of Huaxia turned gloomy when they heard Fang Yan's story. This was a story of looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. In Fang Yan's words, they were the frogs sitting leisurely in the well. How could they accept such a verbal attack? After listening to the translation, some members of the delegation who did not understand the language of Huaxia looked at Fang Yan with hostility. This was a disgrace and an insult. Saburo Fujino's face turned extremely ugly and he said, "This is a very unfriendly act. If Rosefinch Secondary cannot give us an explanation, then we will immediately end our visit and sever all cooperation with Rosefinch Secondary. Also, we will ask for justice from Huaxia through the Japanese embassy." The classroom was noisy and the atmosphere was clearly divided into three opposing emotions. When Fang Yan was telling the story, he already knew the reactions of the various parties. He smiled and waved his hand, saying, "Mr. Fujino, please do not be agitated. I was just telling a fairy tale. I did not say that you are the frogs at the bottom of the well. Please do not make such unnecessary associations. If you insist on putting yourself in this role, it will affect the friendship between the two schools. Then tell me, who is the frog at the bottom of the well?" Saburo Fujino asked in an evil tone. He thought to himself, if you care about the friendship between the two schools, you would not tell such an insulting fairy tale. "The frog at the bottom of the well is the frog at the bottom of the well," Fang Yan replied with a serious expression. "Mr. Fujino, why do you insist on chasing after this boring question? What we should focus on is who is the abandoned well and who is the sea. Then I would like to ask, who is the abandoned well and who is the sea?" "Huaxia culture is naturally the sea," Fang Yan said. Saburo Fujino's chest felt stuffy and he felt as though he would faint on the spot. If Huaxia culture is the sea, then the Japanese culture is the abandoned well. The Japanese culture is the abandoned well, isn't that the frog at the bottom of the well? Going around in a big circle just to insult them once more? Whether it is the Japanese, South Korea or some other civilized countries, the culture they inherit is just a tributary of the sea, Fang Yan said. Without accumulating small streams, there is no way to become a sea. The reason why a sea can be called a sea is because it has many tributaries and a vast body of water. Mr. Fujino will not object to my words, right? Is that really the case? Saburo Fujino's face was filled with ridicule. Blindly hiding and hiding will only prove that you have a guilty conscience. If a tributary is wider than the sea, then a tributary is still a tributary? The sea is still the sea. Regarding this question, you can turn a blind eye to it. However, you cannot stop the mouths of others and the eyes of the world. Fang Yan smiled and said, then, what proof do you have to prove that a tributary is wider than the sea? Won't we know by comparing? Saburo Fujino sneered. Chapter 73. Rosefinch Secondary and Warren Senior High School were on friendly terms. Every year, they would send out representatives for a learning exchange. During the learning exchange, the students from both schools would also compete in small-scale competitions. For example, a speech competition, a quiz contest, sprinting and other physical fitness competitions. Thus, when Saburo Fujino proposed a competition, no one present was surprised. It was supposed to be a competition, just that someone had brought it forward. The problem was, if Fang Yan were to accept the challenge, would his class represent Rosefinch Secondary? Would Rosefinch Secondary be willing to be represented by Fang Yan's Class 9? In the past, it would be the top class that would send their students to participate in the reception. Compete in what? How? Fang Yan asked. Let's compete in tea ceremony, calligraphy, and fencing, Saburo Fujino said confidently. If we lose, then I will take back what I said earlier and apologize to you in front of everyone. All right. Then it is decided, Fang Yan said. When will it begin? No rush, Saburo Fujino sneered. This kid was too cunning. He had only mentioned how they would apologize if they lost, but not how they would be punished if they lost. If your side loses, then what? It is impossible for my side to lose, Fang Yan said, waving his hand. He felt that this was an impossible matter and not worth wasting time discussing. What if we lose? Saburo Fujino was once again filled with anger. Fang Yan was like an inflatable balloon. With just a few words and a few puffs, he was able to fill up this big balloon. Fang Yan thought about it and said, if my side loses, I will also apologize to you and admit that what you said about Tang Dynasty culture in East Asia is correct. It's a deal, Saburo said. Fang Yan rolled up his sleeves and asked, when will the competition begin? Should we compete in tea ceremony, calligraphy, or fencing? How about we start with fencing? Everyone likes to watch a good show. Let's have a good show first. Saburo Fujino saw that Fang Yan was about to fight and said, Teacher Fang Yan, what are you doing? It's not a competition between you and me. It's a competition between my students and your students. Whether the Huaxia culture can be passed on or not is not up to us teachers to decide. It's up to the future of these countries. Saburo Fujino pointed to the students from the two countries in the class and said, they are the witnesses and beneficiaries. Whether or not the Huaxia culture has been inherited, teacher is the most qualified to speak. If a teacher's ability was mediocre, how could he have the qualifications to impart knowledge to his students? You are a teacher, and so am I. Why don't we just compete? Simple and direct. Fang Yan thought that if this kid agreed to spar with him, he would break his limbs first. Let's see how he could compete in tea ceremony and calligraphy. If you want to compete, then you and I will add another round. However, that will be after the competition between these students, Saburo Fujino said. He knew that Huaxia was someone who cared a lot about face. Thus, he would not be able to withstand being goaded. He sneered and said, Teacher Fang Yan, do you not have confidence in your students? Fang Yan looked at the students below the stage and asked, "Do you have confidence?" "Yes." The students of Class 9 roared. Their emotions were stirred up and their faces were filled with excitement. "You see," Fang Yan smiled. "They are full of confidence, and so am I. Since Mr. Fujino has challenged us again and again, then we can only accept the challenge. Truth be told, I really do not want to do this." "Why?" "I have to bear the risk. If I lose, some people in the school will say that I, Fang Yan, am incompetent and want to kick me out. If I win, those who say that I am incompetent will think that I am destroying the relationship between the two schools and want to kick me out. Tell me, is it better for me to win or lose?" Li Ziqiang, Jia Siding and the others felt a burning pain on their faces. They had already made up their minds. They would use this incident to find an excuse to kick this kid out. They did not expect that Fang Yan would not defeat his opponent. Instead, he would attack their faces from both sides. What do we, Huaxia people, care about? Peace is the most important. If my students win against your students, you will definitely be in a bad mood. You can't win in a competition, you can't win in a fight, you can't win in a fight. Come in a happy mood and leave in a sad mood. If you go back, others will think that we have done something to you. The winner has not been decided yet. I believe in my students, Saburo Fujino said. He thought to himself, why does this kid keep thinking about competing with me? Could it be that he is so knowledgeable that he has extraordinary talent? At that moment, the bell for the end of class rang. Even though the Japanese students were dissatisfied with Fang Yan, they still stood up politely and bowed in unison. You have worked hard. The Wu-Ren inspection team lined up and left the classroom in an orderly manner. Matsushima Ki looked at Fang Yan with a thoughtful expression. From the beginning to the end, Lu Chaoga's face did not show any expression. No one could tell what her true attitude was. After all the outsiders had left, there were only the students of Class 9 left in the classroom. Fang Yan walked over and closed the classroom door. It was noisy outside the classroom, but inside the classroom, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The smile on Fang Yan's face gradually faded. He looked at the 40 students in the class with a serious expression and said, "What do you want to say?" Mr. Fang's rebuttal is good. It's a good rebuttal, Mr. Fang, let's compete. Who's afraid of who? Will the sea be afraid of a small river? Just swallow them up. Fang Yan did not laugh. He looked at the students below the stage with a gentle gaze and said, in front of the aliens, no matter what, I will not admit that what they said is right. They want to slap our faces, but should we also slap our own faces? I can't do that. Now that the door is closed, we are all on the same side. Let's seriously think about it and reflect on it. Why did such a saying spread? The culture of the Tang dynasty is in Japan, and the culture of the Song dynasty is in South Korea. Is it true that in some aspects, they are really better than us? Do we really do our best? Do we really have a clear conscience? Times are developing, technology is advancing, we have gained a lot, we are becoming stronger and stronger. But aren't there a lot of precious things that we've thrown away? What does our country, Huaxia, have? We have agricultural culture, we have the 100 schools of thought, we have high mountain flowing water, Guangling Chu, we have calligraphy, painting, Tai Chi, and 8 trigrams. We have the 12 zodiac signs, we have the Book of Songs, the Songs of Chu, and the Art of War. We have traditional festivals, we have Kunku, Hunan Opera, Beijing Opera, Shadow Play, and Huangmei Opera. We have the Great Wall, gardens, and clock towers. We have traditional Chinese medicine, we have yin and yang, we have the 5 elements, we have paper-cut kites, clay figurines, embroidery, we have the 4 great inventions, cooking utensils, clothes, and clothes. You can't imagine how rich we are. But, are we proud of it? Fang Yan looked at the students below the stage and said, what I don't understand is, why do those people who have learned a little dare to come to our territory and provoke us? Are we too friendly, or are we really easy to bully? What makes them think that we have really lost all the essence of culture? The students were silent, thinking about every word that Fang Yen said. Yes, what makes those Japanese think that they are the true inheritors of the Tang culture? Are they really as excellent as they say? Or is it that there is a gap in our inheritance of the Tang culture, so we have become a joke in the eyes of others? What did I inherit? Drinking American Coke, watching Japanese anime, playing Blizzard games, singing Korean songs, driving German cars. How many Tang and Song poems have I memorized? Who is Lao Zhuang's thought? Where is his thought? How many pages of the 4 classics have you read? How many rounds of chess and Go can you play? We think that steak and Western food are high-end food. Are the 8 classics and thousands of variations not the essence of food? Are the Japanese wrong? Or are we wrong? If the Japanese win, they will win face. If we lose, we'll lose everything. Fang Yen stood on the podium and bowed deeply to the students below the stage. Please, everyone, please step on them. Lu Chaoga did not speak, and neither did Fang Yen. Lu Chaoga was writing a manuscript. Her white fingers held a black pen, and beautiful small words jumped on the paper like newborn silkworm chrysalis, which was pleasing to the eye. What was more beautiful was the person. Lu Chaoga was really a rare beauty. Her hands were soft, her skin was smooth, her figure was full, and her facial features were exquisite and flawless. She was wearing a black slim-fit uniform with a light yellow collared shirt. 2 buttons of the shirt were unbuttoned, revealing a snow-white neck. The most attractive thing was her cold and arrogant temperament, as if nothing mattered to her. She was a goddess in the sky, and you were a speck of dust on the ground. In terms of youth, Jiang Qin was number 1. In terms of aura, Qin Etian was invincible. In terms of charm, Lu Chaoga was no match. In terms of barbaric violence, Yi Gentle was a lonely loser, far ahead of others. Fang Yen rarely saw Lu Chaoga in casual clothes. Of course, she looked good in professional clothes. Pa! Lu Chaoga finally capped the pen, then picked up the tea in front of her and drank it. Fang Yen also raised his teacup and took a sip of tea, as if the 2 of them were going to drink it all in one go. Lu Chaoga looked at Fang Yen with sharp eyes and said, I have convinced the board of directors and the school leaders to agree that you will lead the 9th class to represent Rosefinch Secondary to accept the challenge of the Wuren investigation team. I have no choice but to agree. Fang Yen smiled. I am the one they are looking for. If you lose, I will make you leave. If you win, I will promise you one thing, Lu Chaoga said. What is it? Fang Yen asked happily. I don't have to return the money I borrowed from you. Chapter 74. Lu Chaoga did not laugh. She looked at Fang Yen with a serious expression and said, Do you know what this competition means? I do. Fang Yen nodded. He knew what Lu Chaoga was worried about. He also knew that she must have taken responsibility in front of the board of directors or the school leaders in order to speak up for him. This is a fight for face and also a fight for substance. To put it more broadly, this is a fight for national pride. With national pride, the people could stand up proudly. If the country could not stand up, the words of the people were equivalent to farts. In the past, the exchange competition with Wuren Secondary School had been handled by the first class of the top class. This time, this heavy responsibility was suddenly handed over to the 9th class. How could the teachers and students of the first class be satisfied? How could the school leaders and teachers be at ease? Lu Chaoga must have done a lot of work in order to calm the worries of the leaders and the resistance of the first class. In class, Fang Yen told the story of looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. He compared the Wuren delegation to the frogs in the bottom of a well. Although he did not say it very clearly, everyone was well aware of this kind of thing. According to the rules of friendship between the 2 parties, what Fang Yen said was actually out of line. It was suspected of damaging the relationship between the two schools. However, from the beginning to the end, Lu Chaoge did not show any anger. Even when Jia Siding and the others encouraged Lu Chaoge to stand up and scold Fang Yan, she still remained silent. Fang Yan was only a teacher in the school. He could speak eloquently and engage in a war of words. However, Lu Chaoge could not. She was the vice principal of Rosefinch Secondary. She was the main person in charge of Rosefinch Secondary's contact with the Wuren delegation. If there was an honor, she could take credit. If there was a problem, she would also have to bear the responsibility. She was willing to tolerate Fang Yan and was willing to fight for such an opportunity for him. This was not only because she was Fang Yan's leader, nor was it because she had a good relationship with Fang Yan. It was because no one from Huaxia could retreat when faced with such provocation. Absolutely not. After listening to Fang Yan's answer, Lu Chaoge finally felt relieved. Previously, he was worried that Fang Yan would not take the competition seriously because of his cheeky smile. Now that she heard him say this, she knew that he had a clear understanding of this matter. In fact, his understanding was even deeper than his own. It's good that you can think that way, Lu Chaoge said. The match is tomorrow morning. The first was tea ceremony, the second was calligraphy, and the third was fencing. Who are you going to send out for the next 3 matches? Fang Yan squinted his eyes and smiled, saying, our class is full of talents. Any one of us can beat them down. Be more serious. To be honest, I already have candidates for calligraphy and fencing. But regarding the tea ceremony, I have to go back and do some research, Fang Yan said. After all, I've never had tea with a student before. If I really can't find anyone, can I borrow one from another class? Lu Chaoge looked at Fang Yan and thought, if you haven't had tea with a student before, have you fought with a student before? It was quite possible that he had struck despicable before. I have a candidate, Lu Chaoge said. Who? Qin Tian. Qin Tian? Fang Yan was stunned. Is this woman really the omnipotent Ultraman? Is there anything she doesn't know? It's the candidate recommended by Principal Zhang, Lu Chaoge said. Lu Chaoge had never had tea with Qin Tian, and the two had never even had direct contact. However, after the meeting, Principal Zhang Xiaofeng specially made a phone call to recommend a candidate for the tea ceremony. Lu Chaoge kept it in mind. She believed that Principal Zhang Xiaofeng wouldn't play any tricks on this kind of thing. After all, if they lost the competition, Lu Chaoge's face would be damaged, and Principal Zhang Xiaofeng would be the most shameful person. After all, he was the principal of Rosefinch Secondary. Principal Zhang. Fang Yan thoughtfully looked at Lu Chaoge. Principal Zhang sent Qin Tian to the 9th class, and they have a good relationship. Could Qin Tian be Principal Zhang's daughter? Adopted daughter? Lu Chaoge's face slightly changed, and she said, don't make wild guesses about the leader's family affairs. Huh, just kidding. Fang Yan laughed and said, I know Principal Lu is busy, so I won't bother you. I'll talk to Qin Tian and see if she can spare some time to come to class tomorrow. It's really pitiful for a teacher to be like me. You must win. Lu Chaoge said very firmly. Don't worry, it's hard to lose. Fang Yan indifferently waved his hand and said. He walked to the door, then turned to look at Lu Chaoge and said, if you win, will you really promise me one thing? Yes. Lu Chaoge said. After thinking for a while, she added worriedly, as long as it's within my ability. Don't worry. I'm not that kind of person who doesn't know what's good for me. Fang Yan said. Just now when I said that you don't have to pay back the money you owe, it was a joke. Don't take it to heart. I understand. Lu Chaoge nodded. If you are really willing to promise me one thing, then lend me another sum of money. I'm a little short of money now, and life is very stressful, get out. Lu Chaoge threw the pen holder on the table at him. Qingfeng Tea House. The owner of the tea house was called Duan Yujun. He opened the tea house in front of the school because it was a busy main road with more people. Another reason was to attract the business of the teachers and parents of the students. If the teachers wanted to talk to their friends about something, wouldn't they come to his tea house for a cup of tea? When the parents of the students came to pick up their children, wouldn't they come to his tea house when they were bored? However, what Duan Yujun couldn't understand was why there was a large group of students all of a sudden today. Not only were there students in Rosefinch Secondary's uniform, but there were also Japanese students speaking Japanese. Since he couldn't understand, he didn't want to think about it. He ordered the waiters to welcome the guests warmly and tried to satisfy the various requests of the guests. He had to make these students feel at home. The reason why he came to Qingfeng Tea House was because he had his own difficulties. There was a conference room in the school, but there was no corresponding tea set. There were tea sets in the headmaster's office and the vice-headmaster's office, but they were not complete. Also, the space was too small to accommodate so many people at once. Therefore, Fang Yan suggested to hold the competition at Qingfeng Tea House in front of the school. He often drank tea here with Huang Haoren's father, Huang Wenxiang, so he knew that Qingfeng Tea House's environment was good. Also, there were often people competing tea here, and all kinds of tea sets and utensils were available. Since it was a competition, they needed to set the judges first. Otherwise, they would argue that it was good for them and argue that it was fragrant for them. If they couldn't come to an agreement, they would end up fighting. Lu Chaoga and Nori Matsushima discussed for a while and decided that both of them would be the judges. The other judge would be Duan Yujun, the owner of Qingfeng Tea House. Lu Chaoga went to talk to Duan Yujun, and Duan Yujun naturally agreed. The reason why he opened a tea house here was because he was a tea lover. Not only did he drink tea, but he also often accepted tea challenges from others. He could be considered a famous tea master in Huacheng. Duan Yujun understood the reason and knew that the students of Rosefinch Secondary were going to have a tea ceremony competition with the Japanese students here. He immediately got someone to open up a private room in Qingfeng Pavilion, which was usually not open to the public. This private room was huge and could accommodate dozens of people at the same time. It was a high-class tea house that he used to compete tea with others and train his staff. Some of the people were sitting, while others were standing apart from each other. It didn't make people feel crowded. Everything was ready and waiting for the contestants to enter. Fang Yan sat behind Lu Chaoga, and Li Ziqiang sat next to Fang Yan. Li Ziqiang looked straight ahead, but said to Fang Yan, I don't like you. I can't like you either. Fang Yan was stunned. He didn't expect Li Ziqiang to say this to him at this time. It was so honest, so straightforward. He really wanted to touch his face and see if he was wearing a mask. Could it be that the guy sitting next to him was the arrogant Director Li who didn't even want to look him in the eye? Of course, he didn't look at Fang Yan in the eye. He didn't even look at him in the eye. Fang Yan felt uncomfortable, but he still said with a smile, it sounds very regrettable, but it's fair. I don't like Director Li either. Young people should know how to be humble and low-key. Who hasn't been young? Who didn't get through it when they were young? Why are you different from others? Why do you want to amaze the world with one brilliant feat after you come? Li Ziqiang continued to reprimand. Besides, you offended Director Zheng, and I owe Director Zheng a favor. It's even more impossible for me to like you. Yes. That's how it should be. Fang Yan nodded. Director Li said it very well. If you have any dissatisfaction with me, you can say it directly. Even if I won't change a word, at least you will feel better, right? Director Li, continue. Continue. I'm listening. Fang Yan said enthusiastically. Release it well, don't suffocate yourself too much. I have nothing to say to you, Li Ziqiang said angrily. Even if I don't like you 100 times, but, today, I still want you to win. You have to win too. This time, it was Fang Yan's turn to be speechless. As if it was the first time he met Li Ziqiang, he looked at him in surprise and didn't speak for a long time. Was this still the Li Ziqiang he knew? Was this still the Director Li who wanted to kick him out of the school? Why? Is it strange? Li Ziqiang sneered. What kind of expression and attitude did Fang Yan have? Today, we are all Huaxia people. Director Li means. After today, you won't play with me tomorrow, right? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.